The world of virtual reality is very exciting, and many people immerse themselves in it to feel like they are in a different role. Each game has its own history, original locations, and content. Now, the players have come to the territory where the dragon lives, and there is a pasture for it nearby. There was a fierce battle going on here with two boys trying to overcome a huge scary monster. It was not easy at all. The monster had many skills, although the guys also knew how to attack and defend. However, the angry dragon was, of course, fire-breathing and released fire from its mouth to incinerate its rivals. The guys skillfully defended themselves with their shields and continued to fight even though the flames set everything on fire. So one of the boys jumped high and decided to attack the huge creature from above. He managed to hit this dragon's super strong skin with his sword, and the boy was hurt by the blow. The monster became even more enraged as he was wounded, albeit slightly, and counterattacked the boy. As a result, he dealt a very powerful blow to that guy, and the player shouted to Lee O-Rim what he was doing. Couldn't he use healing normally? Lee O-Rim was a thin, not very skillful player. He could barely hold his scepter, and eventually apologized and said he would improve. He then raised his scepter and used the Holy Mother's blessing, restore stamina skill. Lee O-Rim was already very exhausted. It was a place of kinetic hyper VR MMORPG game. The online ergosphere is a region of space-time near a spinning black hole that is located between the event horizon and the static limit. Here, players can choose roles to accumulate experience to grow and explore this fantastic world. If you want, you can become a laser that can defeat a dragon, or become a magician who can summon giant golems. That's why the motto of this game is to awaken a new personality, and why more than 20 million users play it. Each of them has their own special role and new experience and is happy to join this virtual reality. The players enjoy their fantastic life, and Leo Rim also has a role in that game. Everyone came to him for help to heal them, but they did not respect him and called him ugly names. And the little boy hurried as fast as he could to help the needy and tried to be useful. He was too insecure, especially since he was constantly humiliated and often clumsy. So Leo Rim had the most boring and unexciting role of all. He was a healer, and his duty was to watch others play and at the same time heal them. He was just a healer. Once again, Leo Rim was unlucky. As he was running to help, he stumbled and fell, and immediately the other players attacked him, calling him an idiot and ordering him to move faster. But while those players were indignant and scolding their healer, they were attacked by a monster. So the guys realized that they had screwed up. It was 100% monster skill, but there was nowhere to run. A huge dragon opened its mouth and regurgitated powerful fire at the players. As a result, 3 players were defeated and the dragon moved on. So Yu Minho Kim Shinhwan and Lee O Rim died from a high-class dragon in the pasture. The healer felt like crap. On the edge of the hill sat another player who was the leader among them. He was dissatisfied with another defeat because he thought that this time they would be able to cope with the dragon, but the dragon was stronger. The player then called the system and asked how he could help. Then the guy told her to remind the players to retreat for everyone. He went to the other players, then looked again at the pasture where they had just suffered a crushing defeat and thought that this was the level of Leo Rim. A little further on, clearing, one of the players brutally beat the healer because he was very angry with him. Poor Leo Rim could not resist the strong guy because he was small and thin and bullied to boot. The guy was yelling at him that he was a fucking idiot and that he couldn't even heal. And if he had done everything properly, they could have caught the dragon, but Leo Rim had ruined everything, and the guy called him names again. Leo Rim didn't know how to justify himself anymore. He kept saying that he was very sorry for what had happened. However, the older man was relentless. He kept hitting the healer with his hands and kicking him everywhere, saying that one offense was not enough for them. But then their supervisor came up and ordered the older boy to stop beating Leo Rim, which surprised him a bit. And then he coolly added that they are all inside the game, which means that O-Rome will not be hurt at all. The older boy agreed and said that the next day he would beat Leo Rim at school in reality. The unfortunate Leo Rim barely got to his feet and again began to sincerely apologize for letting the team down. He shook his head and said that it was only because of him that they all lost the game, even though they had every chance to win. The boy repeated over and over again that he was very sorry indeed. The manager patted Leo Rim on the back and told him not to worry so much because games are for fun and things can go wrong at any time. Leo Rim didn't expect anyone to support him, so he giggled nervously and said that Hyun was right. And then the manager asked that in any case, even if it's just a game, would Leo Rim take responsibility for his mistake or not? The guy asked what he meant. And the leader immediately explained that he had ordered O-Rome to prepare 600 units of high-quality potions for them for tomorrow by 8 in the evening. Hearing such an incredibly large number, Leo Rim was sweating as to how he would accomplish such a task. He threw up his hands and said that it was more than 300,000 won in cash, so how could he do it alone? And the leader approached the rest of the boys and reminded them that they had agreed to play with the boys from Shindun school, and one of them asked if there would be girls there. And then everyone started discussing their plans for the evening and agreed to meet at Chulhyun's karaoke at 10 o'clock. Leo Rim just stood by and listened to their chatter, knowing that it was not his business personally and that he was not needed. The manager told the guy that they would all trust him and come out first. And finally, I read the terms of the task once again, that Leo Rim needed to collect 600 units of high-quality potions and no less. He also added that the boy himself knows what will happen to him if there are not 600 of them. However, the unfortunate O-Rim complained about how an ordinary healer could organize all this himself. No matter how much the boy thought about it, it still turned out that even if he played all day, he would still be able to collect only 300 units. He was even afraid to think about what they would do to him if he did not fulfill this task. After all, in this case, the guy will definitely be beaten, as it happened last time. Leo Rim did not know what to do in this situation. He simply fell into despair and said that he hated everything. Realizing that there was nowhere to go and he had to do something, he called the system. Father Rome gave the system a command that he wanted to leave the world where he was a healer and enter an alternative world. The system accepted the command and acted on it, and Lee Orim was logged out of the system and a secondary character was created. The system was taking the guy out of his main role here, namely the role of a healer. Lee Orim gets very tired when he uses the second class, but it's the only way he can get everything done by tomorrow. So the system announced that the exit was complete and a secondary character was created. This hero belonged to the Avenger class, and the system announced the entry for the guy as a new hero. The system also warned the boys to be vigilant because they might be tired due to the difference in grades. But Lee Orim already knew all this in advance. He just had no other choice, so he asked where he was going. And immediately, the system transferred the guy as a new hero to a high-end dungeon. It was the Red Abyss, where one team of players was already waiting to fight the monster. The monster was the first to attack, and the players hid behind the shields and repelled the attack. One girl shouted to everyone to hold on until the next final turn, because then they would be able to get to the monster. All the players held their shields in front of them. The monster was furious, and it was many times bigger than the players. Suddenly, he raised his hand, clenched into a fist, and decided to strike from above. The attack was so strong and unexpected that two members of the group did not have time to escape and were killed by the premium Balrog. The other participants were shocked that two of their group were injured by just one hit from the monster, and they thought they could not cope with it. There was one more guy and one girl left, Nuna. The guy attacked and said that Nuna should use her resurrection skill at this moment, but the girl did not agree. And the guy used Supersonic's speed boosting skill and kept his swords ready. He knew that if he did this, he would take all the monster's attention to himself, and this would allow them to buy some time. So the guy was already near the monster and it was about to hit the player with its fist from above. And now the guy saw that the rank of that monster was higher than he thought. But Lee O-Rim was already there, and he immediately used his skills Loyalty Revenge, Anti-Barrier, and Endurance Damage Absorption. Using these skills, the guy managed to stop the fist of a monster that was about to crush another player, and the group members did not even know who he was. With one sharp and skillful movement, Lee O-Rim managed to deprive the monster of its upper limb up to the shoulder. The monster roared and swung his other arm at his opponent. However, Lee O-Rim ran extremely quickly up the monster's arm to its head. And the next thing the guy did was to deprive the giant monster of its huge horn on his head. Nuna was watching this fight in amazement and said that it was crazy and that this guy seems to be a very good player in this game. And another guy said that it shouldn't seem so obvious that O-Rim is able to defeat a Balrog on his own playing as a hero of such a difficult class. And this can only mean that O-Rim must be an outstanding player, or perhaps a player from an Asian server. The monster has already suffered a lot of damage, so he gathered the rest of his strength and decided to attack again. 3 players stood in front of him, waiting for the next attack. Nuna asked what it was going to be and was told that it was the final blow of the Balrog. Lee O-Rim now decided to use the God's Fire skill to counterattack the monster. As a result, the second arm of the monster that had been hit simply dissolved. Nuna protected herself and another player from the shockwave with her scepter, and the monster gradually disappeared. Lee O-Rim realized that the final stage of the battle had come, that the monster was already in agony. And so I used the innate passive skill of the player of the Avenger class, the Sunset Flower. The system warned if the stamina fell below 80%, the player would receive a 50% increase in strength for 10 seconds. Lee O-Rim thought and clearly decided that in order to complete the battle, he would combine a passive skill and a final blow. As a result, the monster did not manage to do any harm to the boy. And Lee O-rim didn't stop. He used the Dead Pavane skill, and all the monster's potential attacks were directed back at him. It was a powerful blow that resulted in the final destruction of the monster. And as a result, after the monster was defeated, a lot of rewards were given to the winner. Lee O-rim stood very exhausted and said to himself that it was still a bit hard. Then he saw the two players standing there, still fascinated by the way O-rim had destroyed the monster, and apologized to them. The players were shocked, and Lee O-rim explained that they were in the middle of a battle and he suddenly burst in, and Nuna said that everything was fine, but he could have died. O-rim laughed and asked if he could take one of the awards, namely the Horn of the Balrog, and Nuna replied that he could take everything. However, Lee O-rim took only what he asked for and modestly said that one would be enough for him, and he thought to himself that if he sold this horn, he could buy more than 600 units of high-quality potions. Lee O-rim was about to leave when the players detained him. They asked him if he wanted to join them, and they would do their best to support him. Rome liked the offer and politely thanked him, but said that he was still in high school and had to go to school. Then he said that in any case, they did a good job and now he would go first, so the players asked him to at least accept them as friends. But Lee O-rim could not fulfill such a request because it was now his other role. Those two players were upset. They thought that O-rim had refused them friendship because they were losers, and they were 100% sure of it. And the Avenger himself was already running to the exit of that location because he had completed his work. He thought that if he played with others, it would be difficult to stop in the middle. Then the guy asked the system what time it was, and the system told him that it was 11 o'clock and 20 minutes in the evening. O-rim was surprised that it was so late and he had to do his homework and wash his clothes. Then he wasted no time in requesting to quit the game and be expelled. After returning to the real world, Lee O-rim decided to do his laundry first, and then study for his homework, remembering that he didn't have much laundry to do, so it shouldn't take long. While the guy was thinking about his business and making plans, the system stopped and sent a message. A message appeared on the screen asking if Lee O-rim really wanted to leave the world of this character. It surprised him, because he had never seen anything like it before. Deciding that this was some kind of error in the system, O-rim clicked on the approval button, but another message appeared on the screen asking if the user would not regret his decision. The guy did not understand why such questions kept appearing, and the system would not let him go. As a result, Lee O-rim decided to check the server status, which was the first time this had happened to him. It was already late at night, and the active life in the city had stopped, with only a few windows showing that the owners were awake. In a low house near the coffee shop, one of the windows was also lit by light, and it was there that Lee O-rim lived. Finally, after all the manipulations of the system and several confirmations from the guy, he received a notification that the game was over and he could take off his helmet. During all this time, O-rim managed to sweat a lot, and he knew that playing the vigilante was very exhausting. Now he had to rush to do his homework and take a shower, and he felt very uncomfortable. Lee O-rim put his helmet on the nightstand and went to the shower, and suddenly the helmet turned on by itself. The boy felt discomfort in his eyes and started rubbing them, thinking that he had been playing for so long that his eyes had dried up. Then O-rim was horrified to see that something abnormal was happening to his body. It was as if it began to decompose into small, tiny geometric figures. And then those small particles separated and whirled around him in a vortex. And then it got even worse. O-Roman's arm simply disconnected from his body and his fingertips also disconnected, and the same thing happened to his leg. Small particles from his body went to the helmet and data transfer and system diagnostics began, and then the biometric verification was completed. The transfer of 224 was completed, and the process of change was started and soon completed. All the parts of the boy returned to their place, but his body underwent significant changes. Lee O-rim was surprised to see that he had grown muscles and felt incredible strength, but he still did not understand what was wrong with his body. Then he looked in the mirror and did not see his usual reflection. For a moment, he thought that in the mirror he saw not himself but the vigilante he had recently played. Suddenly, he threw up, fell to the floor, and vomited as his body tried to accept this transformation. Lee O-rim could not understand what was happening to him and where this state came from. Then he heard sounds from his gaming helmet saying that the system was adapting the materials and that the process was currently 78% complete. The false positive rate is 0.003% for the mission capability judgment, with no problems found. Then the system announced that it was time for Lee O-rim to start training. The guy didn't understand what was happening to him anyway, and then he was told about some kind of training. He decided to take his helmet and see what was going on and find out what it was all about. O-rim reached for his helmet, but suddenly he was not in his room, but outside on the roof of the house. It was windy and the guy's t-shirt was fluttering, and he was standing there with his hand outstretched. It was good that Rome was able to stop in time because the streets of his city were spread out in front of him. The guy could not understand because he had just been in Nuna's room. How he was able to get to the roof of the house remained a mystery to him. Suddenly, he felt someone walking behind him and continuously approaching him. He turned around slightly and froze in shock because he was facing a real monster from his game. It was the black monster who ran up to Rome and attacked him. The guy was still standing there, not understanding how the black monster from the ergosphere had appeared here in the real world. But the monster continued to move towards Rim, and the boy was forced to defend himself. Eventually, an explosion occurred on the roof of that building as a result of a fight with the black monster. The explosive wave sent stones crashing down, and Rim fell to the ground with them. As a result, the guy hit the ground with great force and was beaten a bit by stones. Rome was already preparing to lose his life, but when he landed, he realized that he had survived after flying 5 floors down. The guy got to his feet and could not believe his eyes. He began to think that he was dreaming. But people near him also said that for some unknown reason, the building simply exploded and even suggested that it could have been a gas explosion. When Rim heard what the men were talking about, he realized that he was in reality because the reaction of the people was too real. And around him was a reality that was quite familiar to him, the same streets and houses. Over time, there were a few more people, and they were all wondering about the explosion, and Rim still couldn't understand how it could have happened. And suddenly, he felt the black monster descending on him and attacking him again. He managed to dodge the first blow and began to counterattack the monster. At the moment, he had absolutely no idea what was going on here, but he had to get away from this monster at all costs. Over and over again, people arrived at the scene and wondered what had happened. They realized that something was happening to the ground. Some even said something as stupid as that the cement had overheated and exploded. Rim did not understand why people were just standing there looking at the flames from the explosion and not running away. Then he came up to the boy and the girl and asked why they were standing there and not running away, since there was a monster. Rim didn't just talk, he even shouted at them, but there was no reaction from the people. Then he came closer, touched the shoulder of one of the guys, apologized, and said that they had to leave immediately. The guy grabbed his shoulder a little frightened and looked to the side, not realizing who had touched him. He told his girlfriend that he had just felt as if someone had touched his shoulder, to which she laughed and told him not to talk nonsense because there was nothing there, and even accused him of being drunk. However, the guy insisted that he really felt the touch and even got goosebumps. Rim began to realize that no one could see him. They don't see him or the monster attacking the boy, so they don't run away. Meanwhile, the black monster has already prepared for its next powerful strike. Rim turned around and saw the monster launch its projectile from its mouth. A lot of people had already gathered around, and they were all under threat, but they did not see the monster. And then the black monster struck again, and there was another powerful explosion, but this time among the people, the blast wave touched the guy Rim was talking to. Finally, people began to fuss. Someone shouted that they needed to call the police and an ambulance. Another shouted that someone had already died. The frightened people screamed and ran away, and Rim could only watch them in horror. Meanwhile, the black monster was preparing to attack the boy again, thus harming people on the street. Rome realized that he had to flee from here immediately because he remained in danger here. He was frantically thinking about whether to run away or hide somewhere, but he had to do something. And then Rim abruptly left that place and decided to flee from the monster. All he could think of was that he needed to run away immediately and not look back and thus survive. He ran very fast, but the black monster caught up with him and punched him hard in the face. Rim was thrown onto his back, unable to continue running, and the monster seemed to be playing with him. He threw himself on the boy lying down and beat him wherever he could. Rome did not fight back and he thought he was going to die. The guy recalled that he always tried to escape from the conflict but failed to do so. That's why he was kicked by his abusers every time and accepted his position as a victim. So now Rim did not have time to run away from the black monster, and he just started beating him down with his fists. Of course, the guy was in a lot of pain, both physically and mentally, so he finally decided to stop it and fought back against the monster because he did not deserve such a beating. And now, the black monster was ready to strike the boy again, and he was already savoring the way he was going to do it. However, the monster met a decent counterattack from Lee's opponent. Rim began to stand up for himself. After repelling the monster's attack, the guy did not even realize how it happened. It was a very strange feeling for him, and he realized that this is the same feeling he gets when he uses his skills in the game, in particular the red spike's defense skill. Here, Rim began to understand what was happening to him. He remembered how the system talked about training, and then the black monster appeared and the guy's skills. While he was thinking about it, the monster was about to attack him again and fired its projectile. Lee O-rim gathered himself in the moment and used his passive defense skill, Sunset Flower Blooming, again. With ease, the boy moved his hand to meet the monster's fiery projectile and stopped it. Now Lee O-rim's guesses about what was happening to him have been confirmed. However, he has not yet realized how it all relates to the online ergosphere. And then the guy decided to use the only way he could survive this situation. And the way to do that is to act as he would have done in the game, so he tried to arm himself. And he managed to do it with a few familiar movements. And Lee O-rim is already holding the instrument he used in the ergosphere. And if we take into account the rules of the game, he will be able to survive all this only if he destroys everyone. Now, Lee O-rim was in the Avenger class. He used the skill Phantom Sword of Vengeance. This critical skill reduces defense to 0 and dramatically increases critical hit for 5 seconds. So the guy did not hesitate to use this skill in the fight against the black monster. The monster was thrown far away from Rome, howled, and fell to the ground with a roar. Now, the boy had to make sure that he had destroyed the black monster for good. The monster lay quietly motionless with its mouth open and its eyes extinguished. The black monster is a medium-level monster. Lee O-rim walked closer to it and tried to move the carcass with a stick from afar. Suddenly, the guy saw a flash behind him, just like in an online game. It was the system that appeared and congratulated Mr. Lee O-rim on his victory and on the fact that he had completed the learning task. The guy came closer and was curious to know that such a system had appeared here in reality. The system then offered him to collect the rewards for successfully completing the task. Lee O-rim was quite surprised because it wasn't a game. It was real. And 3 reward options appeared on the screen to choose from. The first one was 3 million won in cash, the second was to get 1 point, and the third was 3 mystery boxes. He wondered if he could actually get a reward if he chose one of the 3 options. I thought it would be nice to get a cash reward, but I wondered what would happen to the status points and random boxes. Lee O-rim thought too long, and time was running out, and now he had 30 seconds to choose. The system informed him that if he did not choose before the time expired, the reward would be selected automatically, and then he would return to the beginning. Lee O-rim was still hesitant to press the button to choose one of the 3 options. At such moments, he believed that it would be best to choose money because it was the most useful reward for him at the time. The system informed him that there were only 10 seconds left, and Lee O-rim was shaking with excitement. In the end, the guy decided to just click somewhere without clearly choosing any one reward. So the choice was made, although it was not very deliberate, but the system accepted it. And then something strange began to happen, which the system called a return. A bright emerald light shone on Lee O-rim, and he began to disappear from the place where he was. The system began to teleport the guy and return to the beginning. And the very next moment, Lee O-rim was in his room from which he had so suddenly disappeared that night. The guy still didn't really understand what was happening to him after that strange transformation. But fortunately, he returned home unharmed, only slightly changed. Finally, this crazy day was over, and the next morning, O-Roma was woken up by an alarm clock. All the news reports said that there were victims of an explosion of unknown origin near Shindaban Station, and the police and fire department were investigating. At the moment, all suspicions fall on indiscriminate terrorism, and all witnesses are wanted. Lee O-rim watched the news and made himself breakfast. He realized that the expected events of yesterday were definitely not a dream or hallucination. All this horror with the attack of the black monster, which people never saw, was really happening. Lee O-rim had just put the cooked breakfast on the plates when his sister returned. She stopped at the door to take off her shoes and at the same time said that she was very tired. Then the girl looked at her brother friendly and asked if anything happened last night. My sister looked at O-rim and was a little surprised by his appearance, but the guy was already standing with plates in his hands and asked if she was tired. He suggested that his sister go take a shower and then have breakfast because he had just cooked a meal. However, the girl still kept her eyes on him, and it was clear that she was worried about something. The sister stared at Lee O-rim and then asked him with some fear who he was. The guy thought it would happen, but he confidently replied that he was Lee O-rim, her brother, and asked if she would not recognize him. Then the sister calmly said that she recognized it, but started looking for something in her bag. Then she abruptly pulled out a stun gun and turned it on, pointing it toward O-Roma. Then, calling the uninvited guest a scum, the girl rushed to attack him with the electrical device. The boy managed to avoid the current and began to ask his sister to listen to him and explain that he was Lee O-rim. However, the girl stood her ground, saying that this was complete nonsense because such a strong man could not be her brother. She continued to say that her brother was weak as a kitten in the rain. The boy was not very pleased to hear that this was how his sister saw him. But O-rim continued to insist that he was her brother, that he had just woken up with that appearance, and that was the truth. My sister only laughed at that because it was extremely difficult for her to believe that her weak brother was standing in front of her. And then the girl suddenly attacked him again, saying that no one would believe such nonsense. Lee Rim again managed to avoid the stun gun and said that he could tell things that only Lee Rim could know. And then he began to feverishly recall various nuances, such as the fact that my sister hates carrots and sesame leaves, and also knows that her jaw hurts because she clenched her teeth tightly in her sleep. The guy also recalled that his sister once forced him to go on a blind date and then complained after drinking that it was terrible, but his sister still did not want to believe that she was seeing her own brother. She again pointed the stun gun at Rim and asked him to continue with whatever else he could remember. Then the boy sadly put his head down and offered his sister some more of his memories. He said that their parents' birthdays were June 23rd and July 14th. And he added very painfully that both of their parents died in a car accident. And that morning he persuaded his sister to take him to an amusement park and said some rude things, which is why his sister refused him. Then Lee Rim lowered his head and said that he still regretted it very much. The guy also said that he had just revealed his secret to his sister and was ashamed of what he had done. No one knows this secret, but he has just told it to his sister, and the girl is immersed in memories, touched and mentally hugged Lee Rim. Then she asked the boy in a softer voice if he was really her younger brother. Lee Rim answered in the affirmative and said that he did not know what had happened to his body and that his body suddenly became like this. The sister put the stun gun away, realizing that there was no threat to her here, just that her brother had changed. Then she came closer to him and saw where many of his wounds came from, so she asked him how he was feeling. Father Rim replied that all these wounds were already there when he woke up this morning. He said that they did not hurt him at all. The guy remembered everything perfectly, but he did not want to tell his sister about the events of the previous night. His sister has always cared about him and will definitely be worried when she finds out what happened. Even now, she said that it was impossible to leave the wounds like that, and that they should definitely see a doctor, which Liu Rim could not allow. However, my sister insisted that I should check my body when this happens, but my brother disagreed. Lee Rim then asked if she thought doctors would believe this because she was a nurse herself. My sister said that they might not believe me, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't check in case something strange happened. Maybe it's the beginning of some kind of disease. Lee Rim said he didn't know how to explain it to her, and he was thinking about continuing to live like this for now. But his sister asked, "What about the school? Does the boy think that teachers and other students will believe that he is the very Lee Rim?" Father Rome immediately latched onto that phrase and said that if they didn't believe him, he would go to the hospital for examination and consultation. The sister exhaled heavily and said that her younger brother was very stubborn about such strange things. But then she agreed, saying that since he had already decided, he should take the bag and go to school, and she would go with him to the teachers and explain everything to them. Lee Rim did not really want his sister to go to school with him to make any explanations. However, the nurse explained that the nurse's words would sound more convincing to the teachers than his. And Lee Rim said that even if she couldn't go with him, he already had a plan for that. But her sister still wanted to do it her way, so she picked up her stun gun again. The girl said that it was time to stop complaining and listen to her older sister, and then asked him threateningly if he would listen to her only after an electric shock. Lee Rim obeyed his sister and said he agreed to let her go to school with him. So they both got ready and headed to the boys' school. On the street, one blogger from the Orange Box YouTube channel was filming his next video, asking if the channel's viewers were still alive, and he was going to visit the mystical place again and show it to them. And this place is Shindaban Street. The blogger intriguingly asked the audience if they knew why he had come here in the morning. And then he told them to read the news about what was happening in the world, as if they hadn't heard that a mystical explosion had taken place in the area, and wanted him to explain everything to them himself. One girl on the way also watched this video, and the blogger said that in any case, the cause of the explosion is a complete mystery, and it could be the beginning of the apocalypse. And even though the viewers do not think that he is overreacting, he likes their objections. The girl listened attentively and said that the Shindaban district was quite far away. She thought that maybe she should go there and check everything out. The girl's name was Kim Chevol, and on the way she met her friend and greeted her. Her friend came closer and asked what Chevol was watching, maybe something funny, but Kim said it was just something simple. She came across this video in her recommendations, so she decided to watch it, but it turned out to be some kind of childish video, and her friend laughed and said that YouTube has incomprehensible algorithms. She then asked Chevol if she wanted to meet someone because someone from her school wanted to do so. Kim Chevol replied that she didn't care because she was not interested in such things at all. The girls were standing in the corridor of the school, and suddenly they saw Lee Rim, accompanied by an older woman. Lee Rim looked like a very impressive young man with only a few band-aids on his face. Chevol's friend was so shocked that she asked who he was and if there were students like that in their school. The girl said she had never seen him before, and this is true because Lee Rim appeared in this way only last night. Shival said that perhaps this boy was transferred from another school because he was now studying with an older boy, and her friend expressed a desire to have him in their class. Kim Shiwol's mind was full of different thoughts about how she felt something when she passed by Lee O-rim. She clearly thought she had seen him somewhere before, but could not remember the details. Meanwhile, Lee O-rim and her older sister approached the teacher's room at the school. The sister said that they would just tell him that he was undergoing a medical examination and that he knew the reason for it. Rome was a little scared, but he agreed to his sister's plan. However, he suddenly said that his stomach hurt a lot because they were in a hurry and now he needed to go to the toilet. The sister gave her consent but asked him to come back quickly, and the boy ran away. Lee O-rim went into a bathroom stall and locked himself in, not knowing what to do next. The guy knew that the fact that his sister was a nurse would not save his situation, because even her teacher would not believe her, because the changes that happened to him were too obvious and drastic. And instead of all that, he will be suspected and then simply called the police. And then he decided to turn to the game system for help and use an attribute from it. He logged in and requested to open one of the random boxes he won yesterday. Lee O-rim held a violet-pink crystal in his hand and was determined to use what he had received. It was a selective skill crystal, and it made it possible to use a skill of another class with 60% proficiency once. So Lee O-rim gave this order to use this item. The crystal flashed with light, and a skill that he could use was revealed. This skill belonged to the spellcaster class and was called the Eye of Enchantment. He also added the skill of mind control, and Lee O-rim absorbed it all. Then the boy came out of the restroom and went to the teacher's room where his sister was waiting for him. The Eye of Magic skill is usually used to make monsters your allies or to get buffs for NPCs, so Lee O-rim had no idea how it would work on ordinary people. To begin with, he decided to try to convince his teacher and thus test the effect of the skill. O-rim thought that the teacher could believe him just like his sister and understand his situation. When Lee O-rim and his sister went to the classroom and talked to the boy's teacher, he said he didn't understand anything. The teacher said that, of course, there are students who change beyond recognition after the holidays, but no one would believe it if they were told that someone had changed so much overnight. O-rima's sister beat her chest and tried to prove that she knew her brother very well. Of course, his face was different, but the way he spoke and his voice were the same. The teacher stroked the back of his head but still stood his ground, saying that even if he was told this, he saw a completely different person here. Lee O-rim knew that this was to be expected, even if his guardian was with him. It doesn't work if he doesn't have at least some kind of identification. So now the guy has no choice but to use the skill to make the teacher believe him, which is what he had planned from the beginning. And then Lee O-rim saw the deputy principal in the teacher's lounge drinking hot tea. The guy came up with another and even better plan to realize his plans. He decided to test his influence skills on the deputy director. If everything goes well, the deputy will be able to convince all the other teachers in the school. So the guy decided to get down to business because it would be better to have someone on his side as soon as possible. So Lee O-rim started testing the Eye of Charm skill. To do this, the boy turned his attention to the deputy headmaster. The man was calmly holding a cup of tea and suddenly felt a strange affection for Lee O-rim. He turned to teacher Chan, who was still talking to sister O-rima, not believing her words. The teacher asked what the deputy director wanted him to do, and he replied that he had been listening to his teacher's conversation with Lee O-rim and his sister for a long time. Then the deputy put his hand on Reem's shoulder and said, "Why not believe this student?" Teacher Chan was very surprised at this suggestion and objected, explaining that this student looked completely different from the real Lee O-rim. But the deputy director asked the teacher if appearance was really such an important detail for a teacher. Then the deputy broke down in tears and said that they shouldn't care what their students look like and that a real teacher would look for the true image that is hidden in his students and educate them. Lee O-rim was shocked by the deputy director's behavior, as he saw that he was clearly overreacting. Then the deputy asked O-rim's sister what she had said earlier, and she said that student Lee O-rim had fallen ill with a rare disease. The sister said that nothing was known yet, and that the doctors said they needed to study him to find out more. The deputy director continued to speak in low tones, saying that if the cause of the student's condition was unknown, it was definitely a rare disease, and added that it could be something else if they did not know the cause in an era when dogs were in space. He then turned to teacher Chan and asked if he would continue to teach a student who had contracted a rare disease and whether he would doubt such a student. The teacher timidly tried to appeal to the deputy's common sense and said that even if they believed the boy, how would they explain it to the other students? Then the deputy director thought a bit, and he recognized that there would be a misunderstanding among Lee's classmates. But I immediately decided to take on the responsibility of explaining the situation to the students because there was no other choice. The deputy also said that they would be the leaders in the class and called everyone else to follow him. Teacher Chan became very agitated and tried to stop the deputy principal and appeal to his common sense. Sister Lee Orima said with fear that the deputy's behavior was a bit strange, but she hoped that everything would be fine. Lee O-rim himself did not know how things would go in the future. He was not sure of his idea. So the vice principal came into the classroom, told the students what was going on, and said that Lee O-rim's classmates should take good care of him. The man continued to say that Lee O-rim himself was shocked by what had happened to him because he had become a completely different person due to a rare disease. The deputy told the students to close their eyes and think about what it was like and think about how heartbreaking and incomprehensible it must be. Kim Chevol was a classmate of Lee O-rim's, and she was concerned about the situation with the boy. The deputy director said that he could not hold back tears just thinking about it, and then he sneezed. The students were now even more surprised because the deputy principal began to cry for some reason. In fact, no one understood why the tears came out of his eyes. Lee O-rim stood next to him with his head down. The guy already thought that everything was over, so he hoped that the deputy principal would convince the students with logic. But these are emotions that will not bribe anyone. Teacher Chan put his arm around the deputy's shoulders and began to calm him down, asking if he had finally realized that Lee O-rim was just sick and needed to be taken care of. Then the teacher turned to O-roman and said that he could take his place in the classroom and he would talk to the deputy about it. The boy sat down at his desk and thought about whether he should just use the skill to say that he was going to transfer out of school. Suddenly, he was called by one of his classmates, the same one who had noticed him in the hallway while talking to Kim Chevol. The girl wondered what had happened to O-rom and whether he was really the famous loser from their class. But my classmate kept asking me if it was a joke, how he could change so suddenly, what had happened to him before, and what kind of disease he had. Lee O-rim began to make something up, saying that he had heard from his sister about acute change syndrome, which is something people get when they are under a lot of stress. Another classmate said that it was not a disease and it was not funny at all, because how can someone change so much from some kind of stress? However, another classmate who sat at the same desk as Lee O-rim said that anything could happen and he had already experienced something similar. It looks like a comic book. Lee O-rim thought that such a speech by the deputy director would not work for the public. He didn't know what to do next until Kim Chevol came to him and said that she had heard of this disease before. Her friend asked her where she had heard about it, and Chevol replied that she had heard about it during a conversation with her father. One person who lived in one city in Germany woke up one day and saw that he had grown 12 centimeters and had a completely different face, and it was about some kind of malfunction in the work of some organ that produces hormones or something like that. Kim Chevol then looked at Lee O-rim ambiguously and asked if she had explained it correctly. The boy looked back at his classmate and replied that it was obvious that he was very nervous. Chevol's friend asked in shock if it was true, and her incredulous classmate said that it was exactly what Lee O-rim had invented. However, the girl said that Chevol has no reason to lie, and her father is the head of a pharmaceutical company, so she hears about such things many times. Meanwhile, Lee O-rim exhaled. Everything was not going as he had planned, but in his opinion, everything was going great. At first, the classmates think it's all very strange, but will they be able to get used to the new him over time? Now it remains to be seen how In-hyun and his friends will treat him. Lee O-rim looked at Hyun and saw that he was staring at his phone and paying no attention to anything. I wondered if the guy was not interested in what was happening here and what everyone was discussing. Kim Chevol interrupted Rom's thoughts again and called him. The girl asked him if he had headphones to lend her because she wanted to listen to music before studying. Lee O-rim replied that he had, but he had already used them, and whether it was okay for her. Kim Chevol replied that it didn't matter. She was indifferent to such things. Then O-rim handed her a container with his headphones, and she thanked him and told him to let her know when he needed them. Then Lee O-rim thought that he really wasn't the same as he used to be. He had changed a lot. He used to be quite short and thin to the bone, but now he has grown bigger and gained muscles. This means that perhaps In-hyun and the others will no longer harass him. But then Lee O-rim stopped those unpleasant memories himself and told himself that there were no maybes. Now everything is going to change for him. Like everyone else, he will make friends and go to school. He realized that in his current body, which had changed so much, he could finally do it. Lee O-rim smiled at the prospects that lay ahead of him because he could really change everything. And then the boy imagined what it would be like to meet In-hyun and his henchmen. O-rom was very worried when he pictured that situation. He thought of something not very good. Those three guys always harassed him, mocked him, and often used force against him. Unfortunately, Lee O-rim could not move a single muscle in front of those classmates, and he was always constrained by panic. But he wondered why. Even though he had a completely different appearance and strength, the same fear did not give him confidence. The guy is constantly afraid of being around a gang that is about to attack and hurt him. When they met face to face, In Hyun and his friends started asking Rim if he had really become a different person and laughed, or if he had been injected with a super soldier serum. Then one of the guys told another named Seung Hwan to do to Rim what he had done to him before because he wanted to see if the poor guy could handle it in his new body. Shin Hwan said that he was also quite interested to see and began to knead his fists. He then approached Rim from behind and grabbed him by the throat, squeezing him tightly. At the same time, the young thug laughed and said, "Let Rim try to get out of his reception." And squeezing the boy's throat even more, Shin Hwan told him to use his new body if he could, of course. And Rim seemed to be completely paralyzed by fear, unable to resist the attacker at all. Only insulting words about what a failure he was were buzzing in his head. That's how Rim's first day at school passed after his body had undergone a radical change. Luckily, nothing bad happened and the guy thought it would be great if tomorrow would be the same. When he left the classroom, Rim remembered that he needed to write to his sister and let her know that nothing bad had happened because she had definitely been worried all day. After he sent a message to his sister, he heard someone calling him. It was his classmate, his friend Kim Shivul, who asked him what he was doing after school and whether he needed to go home right away. The girl said that it was great because they were going to kill some time before going to the academy, so they invited him with them. Rim replied that it sounded very cool and that he had a lot of free time. Suddenly, his phone vibrated and he asked the girls to wait a second. He received a message from Baek In Hyun telling him to go to the toilet on the 5th floor. The guy immediately apologized to the girls and said that he would not be able to keep them company today. He explained that something had happened and he needed to go there and find out. After saying that, Rim turned around and quickly walked to the 5th floor where In Hyun was waiting for him. The girls were disappointed. They wanted to be friends with him. As soon as Rim entered the restroom, Shin Hwan immediately attacked him and began to strangle him. The gang members said that it was enough to strangle the victim because someone else would think they were hugging or something. However, Shin Hwan did not let go. He relished being mocked and said that he wanted to make Rim weak. He wants to push the guy to the point where he urinates on himself out of fear and weakness. Rim could not gather his strength because he had absolutely nothing to breathe. His neck was hurting very badly. He blamed himself for being a fool anyway, and only his body had changed, nothing else. At heart, Rim was a small, weak boy who sat down with his feet in his lap and thought that nothing would change. Suddenly, he heard a voice from the outside asking if he really thought so, and it was the weak boy he used to be speaking to him. Then the kid repeated the question whether Rim still thinks that nothing has changed at all. And then he said that perhaps nothing is changing because Rim itself is not doing anything about it. Finally, he started shouting at the guy to get out because he was no longer the weakling he had been before, and now he was just scared, as he always was. The inner voice kept screaming at Rim to remember how he defeated the monster last night and said that he could do anything if he put in the effort. And you don't just have to wait for it to get better, you have to act and get out. The inner voice was increasingly screaming for Rim to do it, to change himself completely, not just physically. So Rim decided to use his skills and, putting aside all his fears and gathering his strength, he took Shin Hwan's hand away from his throat. And then, with incredible strength, he grabbed the attacker by the jacket and threw him completely over himself, throwing him to the floor. In Hyun and another guy from his gang looked at Rim and the defeated Seung Hwan in shock and fear. Rim could barely stand on his feet because for a long time he could not breathe normally, so now he was coughing. The guy could feel how sick he was. His hands were shaking because he had never done anything like this in real life before. Meanwhile, Seung Hwan had already gotten up from the floor and he was furious, calling Rim a fucking bastard and yelling at him for daring to leave him. The bandit was shouting that the boy would not live, that he was a scum. Rim felt that he would not be able to resist the attacker again, so he decided to flee. And Seung Hwan kept shouting for the boys to catch Rim and not let him escape from him. Meanwhile, Kim Shivul and her classmate friend left school together for a little walk. Her friend was writing something on her phone, and Shivul pulled out a container of Rim headphones from her pocket. Suddenly, she saw their classmate across the street running as fast as he could without even looking back. Her friend Kim Shivul didn't notice because she was looking at her phone. And Rim ran as fast as he could because he doubted his abilities and was not yet used to his new body. The gang of attackers consisted of 3 people, and the boy was sure that he could not beat them all. He was so hunted that with these thoughts in his mind, he felt as if a monster was chasing him behind him, tripped over a stone and fell to the ground, and he was very scared. As the fall delayed Rim, the gang of attackers caught up with him. There was no more escape. So he turned around to face them. The bandits were completely tired of the chase and very angry. One of the bastards snarled that Lee O-Rim was making him sweat unnecessarily, and he asked the guy if he might want to die. Then O-Roman was kicked with all his might right in the face by those bandits who knew no bounds in their abuse of him. The poor guy fell to the ground again and rolled over, and Seung-hwan was already anticipating how he would continue to beat the guy. He shouted to O-Rom that he was going to let him go, but the boy managed to break away from him and run away. So now Hwang decided to make a decent human being out of him, and he began to knead his fists again, preparing to punch his victim. While one thug was beating Leo Rim unconscious, the other two stood by and just watched. They saw that physically their victim had changed a lot. He had developed good muscles and had matured in general. But they believed that the guy did not become someone worthy of respect because of those changes. And so they decided that Leo Rim was a loser and remained so they would continue to abuse him. Meanwhile, Seung-hwan continued to throw chaotic blows all over O-Rim's body, and the poor guy was only thinking about not being able to defend himself in the toilet. So he gathered courage and used one skill to try to escape. But he realized that he could not change anything else because he was driven by total fear when Kim Shivul suddenly approached them. The girl was holding a glass bottle, which she dropped on the ground and shattered. All the guys from In Hyun's gang immediately noticed the clinking, and Shin Hwan even stopped beating Lee O-Rim for a moment. And Kim Shivul asked them if they wanted to leave it as it was because she felt she would have a migraine from all the noise. She also planned to play with that boy over there and pointed to Lee O-Rim. So she asked the bandits if they could let him go and not interfere in her personal affairs. Seung-hwan let go of Lee O-Rim and angrily asked who Shivul was and was told that she was the daughter of the head of a pharmaceutical company. Doesn't he know that? This girl is the richest kid in their school, but Seung-hwan just laughed at her and asked if it was because of her father that Shivul was afraid of them. He defiantly approached the girl and told her to interfere in other people's affairs only after she knew the situation. Does she think she has the right to interrupt the conversation here? Seung-hwan came almost close to Kim Shivul and shouted to her, saying that maybe she wanted to be beaten to death too. The girl calmly looked up at the bandit and asked if he could move away from her 5 steps. And then she defiantly covered her nose with her sleeve and said with disgust that she thought her nose was going to rot from the stench of Shin Hwan. Kim Shivul did not stop there. She also called him an ugly garbage collector. The girl's boastful words irritated him so much that he took a swing at her to hit her, calling her a crazy bastard. Lee O-Rim, completely beaten and exhausted, could not get to his feet and was struck by Hwang's attempted assassination of Shivul. He heard his inner voice again, asking him if he knew what he needed to do now. There is no longer a need for fear and escape, and he can confront the evil that is unjust. An inner voice continued to sound in Lee O-Rim's head, telling him that he was no longer the same. And he is no longer even a healer, Shuttle. He is a completely different person now and a completely different hero. As soon as Seung-hwan was about to strike Kim Shivul, Lee O-Rim abruptly ordered him to stop. And while Hwang was turning around and trying to understand that it was his former victim who was setting him conditions and telling him how to act, O-Rim quickly struck him in the face. The first blow was followed by another and even stronger one, and eventually Shin Hwan found himself on the ground for the second time that day at the hands of Lee O-Rim. O-Rom leaned over his former abuser and shouted at him to stop it immediately. Then he rose above his opponent and frantically yelled again for Shin Hwan to finally stop and called him a damn thug. The bandits were shocked by Lee O-Rim's resistance because he had never allowed himself to be so. They said that this crazy asshole had become completely unmanageable and decided to leave. They thought he might have gone blind because of his illness, because his behavior was completely different from the behavior of the weak Lee O-Rim they knew. Finally, Shin Hwan got to his feet, called O-Rim a scumbag, and asked if he wanted to run away now just like the last time. He admitted that he had fallen again, but warned that the time would come when he would be his rival again. So he began to threaten O-Rom to grit his teeth if he did not want to die. And the next moment, the bandit started attacking the guy again with even more force and fury, striking him. However, very unexpectedly for himself, Lee O-Rim, who met with decent resistance from his opponent, did not allow Shin Hwan to hit him and covered himself with his hands in time. The bandit continued to strike all over O-Rim's body, but he was always met with resistance, but once he managed to hit him in the side. The bandits were angry that Lee O-Rim only barks but does not bite, and that he cannot even defend himself properly. But the boy used the damage absorption skill, and at the same time Seung-hwan struck him again. Lee O-Rim absorbed the blow and accordingly was not injured at all, and the bandit did not understand what was going on. But then O-Rim swung at his opponent with the same hand that had absorbed Hwang's punch and ricocheted onto the bandit. Next, the guy used the skill Vindictive Flower, which allows you to deal several blows in exchange for health. So Lee O-rim's counterattack turned out to be very powerful and completely unexpected for the bandits. Seung-hwan never even managed to dodge the guy's blows. Finally, Lee O-rim kicked his opponent hard and he fell to the ground exhausted, and the fight ended. But the guy still walked up to the fallen Hwang, angrily looked him in the face, lifted him up by the collar, and was about to deliver the decisive blow. As soon as O-rim swung at his unconscious opponent, he heard Kim Shewol call out to him. The girl ordered him to stop at that moment and said that his whole hand was covered in blood. Lee O-rim stopped, looked at his hand, and seemed to come to his senses. Kim Shewol picked up his backpack from the ground and said that he needed to leave and not deal with those bandits anymore. Suddenly, they both heard one of the bandits shouting after O-rim where he was going. The guy turned around and saw that he was being chased and swung a huge stick at him. The bandit shouted furiously that he would kill Lee O-rim, that he was already dead and was going to hit the boy with all his might. He was already very close to O-rim and Shewol, and Lee had already raised his hand to protect himself and the girl from being hit. Suddenly, the bandit was stopped by an invisible force used by Kim Shewol and prevented him from harming O-rim. The very next moment, another scumbag from In-hyun's gang was lying defeated on the ground, the stick falling from his hands. Lee O-rim looked at the attacker in surprise. He did not understand how it happened that he fell, since he did not use any force against him. Kim Shewol said that it was finally time for them to leave, and they left the defeated bandits to heal their wounds. And they only managed to shout at Lee O-rim what a bastard he was for daring to treat them like that. It was already starting to get dark, and Kim Shewol and O-rim were sitting by a flower bed, and the girl was putting band-aids on his facial scars. Then she said that this was only first aid, so he would definitely need to go to the hospital. Kim Shewol decided to take a picture of O-rim's face to show him how much it is now disfigured. When the guy saw the state of his body, he felt uncomfortable, and Shewol said she would send him this photo to keep as a souvenir. For Lee O-rim, the situation of someone helping him and not leaving him in trouble is extremely unusual. The boy was very grateful to his classmate and, although hesitant, told her about it. And Kim Shewol asked him why he was thanking her, and she didn't remember giving him any money. But Lee O-rim said that he was not grateful for the money, but just for a few things and for helping him before. Then Shewol reminded him about the headphones she had forgotten to give him, and he had forgotten about them himself. Then the girl pulled the container with those headphones out of her pocket and said that he should consider her help as a payment for letting her take his headphones and asked if that solved everything. Lee O-rim took back his accessory. He really didn't remember them and didn't care. Then Kim Shewol said it was very late and she had to go home. As she said goodbye, she said that she wanted to talk to him again, but would leave it for tomorrow. Lee O-rim was interested in the fact that Shewol had a conversation with him, but the girl repeated that it was a long conversation, so she left it for the future. Finally, she invited him to eat with her the next day and asked if he minded. Lee O-rim was even more embarrassed, but of course he agreed, because a new stage of his life could begin. After that, Kim Shewol turned around and told him that they would see each other tomorrow and waved goodbye. And Lee O-rim seriously thought about the fact that Shewol wanted to talk to him about something in private, but he had no idea what it could be. Perhaps the girl was interested in the changes in his body because she is the daughter of the head of a pharmaceutical company and may be interested in developing drugs or something else. Lee O-rim was walking home when a virtual reality screen appeared in front of him. The monitor lit up, and the guy read a message that in 5 minutes the conquest quest would begin and was asked if he agreed to it. Lee O-rim did not understand what was being said, and he thought that this was exactly what he needed during his busy day. He was already scared that it might be the same as yesterday when he had to fight the monster. Rome immediately decided that no one would want to refuse such an offer again. The guy clicked on the refusal button, but the system immediately replied that users with penalty points cannot refuse quests. Lee O-rim was worried. He didn't know when he had earned the penalty points and what he had done wrong. Then the system displayed information that Mr. Lee O-rim had received 400 penalty points, and the information about those penalty points was given below. Among them was information that 100 penalty points are awarded for using the skill on an ordinary person, and 300 penalty points for using the skill to attack an ordinary person. And in this regard, Mr. Lee O-rim will be forcibly taken to the location of the upper-class conquest quest. This corresponds to 400 penalty points, so the guy had no way to avoid it. And the very next moment, Lee O-rim disappeared from the place where he was, and the system moved him to another place where the quest of conquest was to take place. It was not easy, but he quickly moved through the portal to this place, and he landed right in the water, which was a shallow river, and there was a huge main bridge nearby. Lee O-rim got to his feet, all wet, and said that if he was going to be moved from place to place, let it be a normal place, because he had a smartphone in his pocket. He was also indignant because he was given penalty points without explanation and said that it was a very unfair game. Then Lee O-rim saw a yellow light shine in the air next to him and something began to appear. The guy was a little afraid, but still watched with surprise and curiosity what would happen next. The light panel grew and eventually reached the size of a large door that looked very strange. Lee O-rim stood in the river until he realized what he had to do with the door, which said that it could not be opened at the moment. The boy had already thought that the door was some kind of monster that he needed to conquer. But then the system came to his rescue. A screen with prompt messages appeared. The system informed me that the route quest would start in 10 seconds and warned me to get ready for battle. Lee O-rim asked what he needed to prepare for the battle and why he had so little time, only 10 seconds. Suddenly, the doors that appeared began to change and O-rim stood in a position of combat readiness. A little more transformation and now, instead of a yellow door, a huge monster appeared in front of the boys. He was very big, several times bigger than Lee O-rim, and looked quite scary. It was the infected paladin Abel. His body was a dirty green color. He was wearing protective armor and holding a huge sword. Lee O-rim was very scared. He didn't understand what kind of monster it was because he had never seen it in a game before. The monster stood up to his full height and immediately swung his huge sword at the boy. Lee O-rim prepared to repel the monster's attacks using the abilities and skills he possessed. And so the infected paladin Abel struck the first blow at the boy, but O-rim successfully stopped the monster's sword with his own. The guy thought that even if he had no idea what kind of monster appeared in front of him, he was sure that the sword was his main weapon. Perhaps this is true. Then Lee O-rim was already developing a strategy for fighting that paladin. The infected paladin Abel continued to strike at his opponent, but the guy skillfully fought them off. Lee O-rim had good skills that he skillfully used, and he had already managed to damage the monster and decided that, fortunately, it would not be difficult to conquer this paladin. Compared to animal monsters and animals with non-standard movements, humanoid monsters are straightforward and easy to read. Therefore, Lee O-rim decided to continue to use his skills and abilities in this battle to smoothly eliminate the monster. Suddenly, the guy felt something untoward and inexplicably scared him a little. Lee O-rim, who had been skillfully wielding his sword, felt his hand start to go numb. Something was going wrong that was completely out of his plans for the strategy of fighting the infected paladin Abel. Lee O-rim looked at his hands and realized that something was dulling his sense of touch. For a moment, the boy was confused and lowered his head, while the monster swung his huge sword at him from above. Luckily, Lee O-rim managed to turn around in time and decided to activate the Thirst for Revenge skill. However, he was unable to activate it, and the system informed him that he could not use that skill in this battle. It was a terrible surprise for Lee O-rim, because how can he fight now if he is not allowed to use some of his skills? Meanwhile, the guy was subjected to more and more attacks from the infected paladin Abel, and eventually, the monster managed to hit Lee O-rim on the head because the guy could not always dodge the blows in time. He also noticed that his reflexes were becoming slower, and he could not use the skill. The guy was horrified to think that this could be the beginning of paralysis, and he would not be able to move at all. Now, Lee O-rim realized that the normal attacks of the infected paladin Abel have the ability to paralyze. The guy remembered that the game usually shows a paralysis icon in such cases, so he didn't notice it right away. Lee O-rim wonders what to do now because the Avengers' playstyle is to combine skills. Does this mean that he has no way to win if the activation of abilities is blocked? But the guy immediately stopped himself in those thoughts and forced himself to calm down and think things through carefully. So, at the moment, Lee O-rim was paralyzed, but he could still dodge the extremely slow attacks of this monster. This means that he just needs to conquer this infected paladin Abel, just like in the game. Lee O-rim decided to use the strategy of a cat running away after being hit. Of course, he realized that it would take a long time, but it would be better to be safe. Since it was already difficult for Lee O-rim to move, he decided to do just that and tried to attack the monster. And then suddenly he had a new problem. He began to lose his eyesight and could hardly see anything in front of him. The guy wondered if this aura had just been a vision-blocking attack, but decided to step back and wait until he could see again. However, the infected paladin Abel did not stand still and continued to attack his opponent and managed to strike again. The worst part of Lee O-rim's blow was that he didn't even see the monster attack him. The guy fell down and held his wounded head, and he is lucky that the paralysis does not completely restrain his body, but only when the monster attacks. Lee O-rim frantically began to think about how to proceed and had to change his strategy immediately. Fortunately, his vision gradually began to return to him, but he was still unable to attack due to the paralysis caused by the monster's blow. The guy thought it would be great if there was a healer nearby to treat him at such moments. Suddenly, he had a thought, and Lee O-rim remembered something and decided to seize the idea. The guy stood waiting for the next attack of the infected paladin Abel, and the monster did not hesitate. He struck again, But Leo Rim dodged it, thinking that if there was no healer nearby, he would do something different. He just needed to use the object to get rid of the paralysis. Seizing a moment of time, Leo Rim called the system, which immediately appeared and asked how it could be useful. The guy remembered the random boxes he had received as a reward for his studies and told the system to open the 2 remaining boxes. The system understood everything and accepted the task of opening random boxes. Leo Rim was only thinking that he wouldn't mind at all if he didn't get some rare thing. He just needed some working thing immediately. So the system gave out the 2 boxes that the guy still had unused. Opening the random boxes, Leo Rim received a golden branch. He laughed that it was a good thing. Crows like that, my second item was a northern tier. A gem with a pleasant scent would probably look good in the bathroom. The guy was very disappointed. The 2 items were too useless. Nevertheless, it was necessary to use them somehow because the infected paladin Abel continued to attack Rome. And so the monster managed to strike another blow at his opponent, causing stones to fly from the river bottom. Leo Rim received an extremely powerful blow to the back because he did not have time to dodge it again. The guy was in great pain and fell again, feeling his body breaking the paralysis with renewed vigor. Luckily, he managed to hold the items that fell out of the random box, the golden branch and the northern tear, in his hand. Leo Rim decided to return those items to his inventory. No matter how random those items were, it was too much. The guy's paralyzed body was trembling, but he got to his feet and the infected paladin Abel was ready to strike again. With the last of his strength, Leo Rim raised his sword to repel the monster's attack, and it was extremely difficult for him to do so. The paralytic injuries overlapped each other so that the guy could do absolutely nothing but defend himself. He continued to think hard about what he should do, because at this rate, he would definitely lose his life. Different strategies were spinning in Lee's head about Rome, he thought, if only there was something like a store in the game. The guy recalled how, before the start of the quest, the system warned him that the conquest would begin in 10 seconds and warned him to prepare for battle. And he was still standing there thinking how he should prepare for a battle he had no idea about. And then it dawned on Leo Rome that he immediately called for help from the system, which quickly responded to the request. Then the boy ordered her to call the crows with the golden bow, which came to Rome from a random box. And then I told the system to open the battle preparation page, and it performed its tasks very quickly and accurately. So when I pulled out the golden branch from the inventory, the system informed me that it would be used immediately. Immediately, many ravenous birds flew from everywhere and landed on the paladin, preventing him from attacking Leo Rim. Then the crows even started to land on the monster, and he had to shoo them off and fight them off. The raid of crows allowed Rome to recover a bit and take a break because the monster was prevented from attacking him by the birds. Meanwhile, the system reported that Mr. Leo Rim had used the battle preparation page and changed the northern tier to paralysis cure. The guy decided to immediately use this artifact and take the medicine to be able to continue the fight. So now, the blows dealt by the infected paladin Abel should not cause much damage to Rome. The monster continued to attack, swinging his huge sword. Since Leo Rim was now protected by the anti-paralysis medication, he managed to dodge the blow, and the paladin's sword got stuck between the stones. The boy thought he had jumped higher than the monster and was no longer afraid of the paladin Abel's attacks. And eventually, Leo Rim accumulated enough losses to be able to use the ultimatum. The infected paladin Abel had already managed to turn around and prepare for the next attack, but Rim immediately used the ultimatum skill. Pavana is for the dead, and the guy counterattacked his opponent with all his might. At once, many bloody swords from all sides fell on the body of the infected paladin Abel. Having received many cut wounds, the monster fell down, unable to continue the fight. Finally, Leo Rome managed to defeat the infected paladin Abel and cleared him out completely. Now he can exhale calmly because his thoughts were already different. He even thought he would not survive this game if he had not noticed the battle preparation page. He would not have been able to avoid danger. Leo Rim then called the system and ordered the reward page to be opened as soon as possible because he wanted to finally rest. The system responded immediately and informed me that the reward page would be opened immediately. The boy tiredly began to stretch his joints and thought about not being offered to choose a random box again. But suddenly, an important message from the system appeared on the screen that another user had logged into his account. This was a huge surprise for Leo Rim, and the guy started to worry who it could be. He wondered if there were people here who also made crosses like him. Suddenly, another player appeared on the river and immediately began attacking Leo Rim with his weapon, a sharp-bladed cane. But the guy stopped his punch, which greatly confused the attacker, who thought that his surprise attack would be successful. Leo Rim turned to face his opponent and faced a new battle in this unexpected quest of conquest. The guy activated the skill Resistance to Revenge Anti-Barrier, which helped him protect himself. Immediately afterwards, Lee O-rim began to counterattack his opponent and pushed him away. The opponent flew away for some distance. He was wearing a black mask on his face, so it was impossible to see him. Lee O-rim really didn't understand what was going on here and why the player who had suddenly appeared in this place was attacking him. The guy looked at his attacker and saw that he did not look like a monster at all. His appearance was different. This newly arrived player looked like an ordinary person dressed in Olympic sweatpants and a baseball cap. Lee O-rim tried to analyze what skill his opponent had just used against him. So he decided to ask him if he belonged to the class of Avengers, because they are characterized by this skill. The opponent replied that he belonged to the class of Scum and again rushed to attack Lee O-rim. The guy had to defend himself even though he did not understand where the next attacker came from. The players crossed their weapons, and O-rim asked his opponent what was wrong with him and why he was attacking him. I heard a very strange answer that the attacker did not know why he started attacking. Then he tried to explain his actions and said that he had never thought about the reasons for hunting in the game before. And immediately, the opponent continued to attack Lee O-rim using the skill, the Coming of the Black Reaper. The stick weapon held by the unexpected attacker resembled a scythe that takes a life. The opponent swung the stick, and its blade hit Lee O-rim on the shoulder and caused him a considerable wound. O-rim did not have time to dodge that blow. He grabbed his wounded shoulder and his opponent was already preparing for a fresh attack. The guy noticed that the attacker was too fast, and he did not have time to cover himself with the defense. And suddenly, Kim Chevol appeared on the battlefield and immediately used the maze with no exit skill. This labyrinth protected Lee O-rim from a blow that an unknown opponent had already struck in his direction. Both O-rim and his attacker did not understand where he came from, that is, who interfered in their fight. And then Kim Chewol, who Lee O-rim hadn't even realized was there, used a zero-level defense support skill against an unknown attacker on her classmate. Then the attacker saw that Lee O-rim had come to defend the Maze Master, and it became difficult for him to attack. Kim Chevol turned to her classmate and said that she did not help him that time because of his headphones. So let him pay for her lunch tomorrow when they go to talk about what they agreed to. The girl said she wanted to eat the most delicious thing in the world, so let Lee O-rim buy it for her. He had no idea what his classmate liked to eat so much, and Kim Chevol told him to buy her strawberry milk. Lee O-rim finally came to his senses and managed to ask his rescuer how she ended up here. However, Kim Chevol replied that they would talk about this and other things later. Then she pointed her scepter at the attacker and said that this was no way to talk while fighting. Otherwise, you can accidentally bite your tongue painfully, and the girl is prepared. Now the attacker on Lee O-rim fought with Kim Chewol, and he struck her, but the girl managed to dodge him. The opponent very quickly and chaotically struck blows that the girl managed to avoid, and then she used the skill trap of the beast guarding the treasure. Immediately, the attacker was surrounded by barbed wire walls and chains on all sides, and thus was unable to attack. However, he could activate his skills, and this time he chose the Walking Ghosts ability. The next moment, the walls of the maze closed, swallowing up the attacker and wrapping him in chains. Lee O-rim was delighted with what he saw, and watched Kim Chewol fight with genuine admiration. But the girl felt that she had defeated another opponent. She was in control and shouted to Lee O-rim to dodge immediately. O-rim did not expect such a turn and only managed to ask what was going on. Suddenly, an attacker jumped out from between the closed walls of the treasure trap maze and towards him. He pointed his hand at Lee O-rim and used the blacklist skill. Some invisible wave barely touched the guy, and then he quickly jumped back. He did not understand what the essence of the skill was that the attacker used against him, only noticed that nothing seemed to have changed. This calmed him down a bit, but then he heard Kim Chewol loudly shouting at him. The girl shouted at him to open the rewards page in the system as soon as possible and choose something. The time limit for choosing a reward does not count when another user interferes, so this is the only way to complete the conquest. Lee O-rim must immediately choose some kind of reward for defeating the infected paladin Abel. Then the guy quickly called the system and sent a request for a reward, but suddenly an unexpected attacker appeared again. He resumed his attacks on Lee O-rim and said, did he really think that he would just watch O-rim choose his reward? The attacker sharply swung his scepter and tried to hit Lee O-rim. However, the boy continued to stand calmly in front of the screen and choose the award. The attacker was shocked why his stroke did not even hit the opponent, because his blade was supposed to cut the guy. Then Kim Chewol came to him and said that it must have happened because the attacker hadn't studied his skill too well. The place where it stands now is the skill area where the girl set up the labyrinth without exits when she teleported here. Now, the attacker noticed this and realized what a trap he had fallen into. And Kim Chewol continued to explain that her labyrinth is filled with barricades of illusions and various traps. And it lasts 90 seconds, so the attacker should have remembered that. If the attacker does not agree with her, she will destroy him the next time they meet, and Lee Orim saw in the system that the return will now begin. Now, the attacker was not happy at all because he was trapped and defeated. He then pulled the mask away from his face and said in a threatening tone that Lee Orim and Kim Shawol would be the ones to lose their lives next time. Because now, after this meeting, he has memorized their faces and will not suffer defeat again. Therefore, he once again threatened that from now on, Lee Orim and Kim Shawol would live in anxiety to meet him. The attacker threw his scepter over his shoulder and said goodbye to the Maze Master and the class of scum. Lee Orim did not like this formulation at all, and he also tried to memorize the face of this scoundrel. Since the conquest quest was completed and the opponent-infected paladin Abel was defeated, the system returned everyone home. Before Lee Orim could recover and realize where he was, his phone rang. The guy pulled it out of his pocket and saw that Kim Shawol was calling him. Orim immediately picked up the phone and started screaming, asking what was going on. Was she really like him? However, Kim Shawol interrupted him and said that she understood that he had a lot to talk to her about, but for today, he should just go home. She then explained that the blacklist skill that the attacker used on Orim was a location tracking skill, and it lasts for 8 hours. Shawol strongly recommended that her classmate hide as best he could during this time. Then the girl added that although she was talking about location tracking, it was not as accurate as GPS, so don't worry, everything will be fine as long as he stays at home. Lee Orim wanted to ask something else, but Kim interrupted him again and said that the guy who attacked him earlier was a user who physically destroyed players. These are people who, instead of receiving rewards for completing quests, collect bonus points by physically destroying people. And it will be very good if Lee Orim does not go against them. That is, if he does not want to take people's lives as well. Then Kim Shawol said that the guy probably realizes that he will not be able to get through to such people. But in any case, she suggested that we talk about everything a little more tomorrow since the boy would be in danger tonight. Then Lee Orim asked what about her boyfriend, who was worried about the girl's safety, because she was spotted by that bastard after she helped Lee Orim, so the guy is really worried about her safety. However, Kim Shawol calmly replied that this was unnecessary worry because she would be able to defend herself perfectly. Lee Orim said that he understood that she would be able to defend herself, but he was still worried that she would be hurt. The guy heard a strange answer from Shawol, who asked if he wanted to stay with her all night or something like that. Lee Orim started to stutter and said that he didn't mean it, he just thought that it would be good to work together in the future. The girl replied that for her it sounded like an offer to be in a party with her. The guy replied that if they stayed together, he would be happy about it in reality. He explained his position by saying that he could now fully trust her. However, Kim Shawol asked him if he could trust a person with whom he had only started communicating today. Lee Orim said he did not know how it worked. Then the girl said that what she was going to tell him tomorrow was not much different from what they had just talked about. Therefore, after Lee Orim hangs up the phone, tell her to write her home address. And Kim Shawol ended the conversation by saying that she would sleep at his house tonight. So after a hard, busy day, Lee Orim finally returned home, but his heart was not at ease. He gave his address to Kim Shawol and now stood in the stairwell at the front door of his apartment, and the girl came. The guy hospitably invited her to his place, and Shawol entered and said that now it so happens that she will be under his care today. Lee Orim politely held her backpack while she took off her shoes and then decided to ask her something. He still couldn't believe that Kim Shawol would actually spend the night at his house, so he asked her about it. The girl was making fun of the Olympian and asked what the big deal was or if he didn't like her. Lee Orim blushed and was very embarrassed by such a direct question, but said that this was not the case. And Kim Shawol calmly replied that in this case everything was fine and there would be no problems. And then she added that they had a lot to talk about after today's day full of adventures and new discoveries. Shawol said that she needed to go to the shower anyway and asked a classmate to lend her at least some fresh clothes. And then Lee Orim saw a note on the kitchen table from his sister, who wrote that her schedule had changed and that she was working the night shift today. The guy didn't like this news because now he would have to spend the night with Kim Shawol one-on-one. And it was necessary that my sister had to go to work today. After a while, Shawol took a bath and came out of the shower, not knowing that she and Lee Orim would be alone in the apartment. The boy asked if his sister's clothes fit her, and his classmate said that they did, more or less, and that she liked the oversize. Then Kim Shawol said that as far as she remembers, Orim lives here with her sister. The guy confirmed this and said that they used to live in their relative's house, but when his sister got a job, they started living together. Shawol pulled out a hand cream from her backpack and asked Orim what happened to his parents. And the guy answered a little awkwardly and shyly that they had died and he and his sister were left alone. The girl was embarrassed by her question and apologized to her classmate for it, but Lee Orim told her not to worry about it. because it was a long time ago in his childhood, so he was already used to this status. Then Kim Chevol suggested that it must be difficult for him and his sister. They stood in the kitchen and talked like that, and then the girl asked when his sister was coming home. Lee O-rim was a little embarrassed and said that his sister's schedule had changed, so she would come home in the morning. His classmate's reaction surprised him a bit because she said it was very convenient. Then Kim Chevol came up to O-rim, looked him right in the eye, and said that in that case they would move on. Lee O-rim didn't understand what his classmate meant and he didn't know what to do, but Chevol called the system. When the screen appeared, the girl ordered the system to send a party request to the user closest to her. Lee O-rim exhaled because he was already having some strange thoughts and the girl had just invited him to a party, so he was scared for no reason. So, a message appeared on the system screen that the user Kim Chevol had sent a party request to the user Lee O-rim, and he needed to confirm or cancel the request. The guy was about to press for approval when Chevol asked to hear her out before he made his choice. The girl decided to tell him all the information she knows as soon as they get to the party, and of course she will do her best to support him. In other words, she was going to give him everything she had. And then she lowered her tone and warned him not to even think about running away, let alone cheating on her. Because in this case, she will grind it with a mixer and make a smoothie out of it to make Kim Chevol look more than serious. But Lee O-rim wasn't even going to think about such things. It wasn't in his nature, so he just wanted to agree. However, the girl insisted that he should think very carefully before making his choice, since they were the only ones here now. And she immediately heard the system reply to Lee O-rim that he had agreed to the party request. Kim Chevol immediately attacked her classmate for not listening to her and thinking things through carefully before agreeing. But the guy said that he hadn't even anticipated that he would need to think about it. This answer somewhat surprised Chevol, as it was impossible not to think about such important things. And Lee O-rim explained that he currently lacks understanding and information about the situation, and at the same time, a user is hunting for him and taking away the players' lives. In addition, unfortunately, O-rim has no way to get out of this situation on its own. In other words, he is now on the verge of ending the game, which is why Kim Chevol is definitely the best choice in this situation, because she is the only one he can rely on. The girl exhaled after that speech and said that she was happy that he thought of her in that way. And the next second, Kim Chevol grabbed her classmate by the collar and pulled him to her. She said that she liked this arrangement only because he was a very daring guy. The girl feels silly for taking it so seriously and asks if he knows how it feels. And then she concluded her speech by saying that it's all for the best, so that they can stop these useless conversations and start developing a strategy. Lee O-rim asked if Chevol has a strategy in mind to deal with a user who takes away players' lives. The girl replied that it was only one of the reasons. Then she went to the system screen and saw something. Then Kim Chevol pointed to an envelope containing an important message. She opened it and read that a large-scale event would soon take place, the exact date of which no one knows, and it was called Horizon. The girl said that they were going to participate in this event and therefore had to come up with a strategy to take first place in it. Lee O-rim was sweating a bit. He was not at all sure that they would be able to take first place. At that time, somewhere, players of a certain team were earning points by playing in a location that looked like hell. The monsters there really looked like mummies, and some of the players had already paid with their lives and left the game. Others realized that they would definitely not have enough strength and skills and would lose among all those undead, and now the King of Destruction appeared. One of the players called another named Arsham Nim and said that they all needed to leave immediately before the undead took them. But then there was another one who muttered under his breath that it was all just garbage, but no one heard him. The newly arrived player didn't say anything, but simply pointed his crossbow at all the mummy monsters and began to destroy them intensively. But at the same time, he was also shooting at other players on the team, and Arkham Nim was hit directly in the stomach by one of the shells. Somehow, a strange player suddenly behaved in a way that was contrary to the general rules of the game. Then he used the Dragon Slayer skill, and the guy behaved as calmly and confidently as possible. Monsters came at him from everywhere, but the strong player skillfully dealt with them and destroyed them. All the other players were shocked by his actions. And finally, when all the monsters were killed, he said that the losers should behave like losers and crawl on the ground. It was the same player that Lee O-rim had met in battle. His name was Baek In-hyun, and he had now advanced in the game from archer to executioner. In Lee O-rim's apartment, two classmates who had formed a party with each other were strategizing for participation in the upcoming Horizon event. The guy had no idea about it at all. He was curious to know what it provided for, so he asked Kim Chevol about it. However, the girl did not know what would happen there. She did not know any details, but she was sure of one thing. Namely, the first place winner will receive 20 billion won and the fulfillment of one wish as a bonus. Lee O-Rim's mouth dropped open in surprise when he heard about such a huge amount of money. And then he asked Kim Shiavol if she didn't think the wish-granting bonus sounded like a bit of a hoax. The girl replied that she also thought it was impossible and that 20 billion was too absurd. But she told her classmate to think about them more specifically about their experience. After all, the two of them are already beyond logic, having even recently fought monsters in reality. This means that the fulfillment of a wish does not sound so absurd and is quite possible. And if this is not true, he or she can make a simple wish to get out of this game. Lee O-Rim thought about it and asked his friend where she got this information from, but she said she didn't know any details. And Kim Shiavol said that she received an invitation letter after completing 10 quests and added that he would probably receive the same invitation when he completed 10 quests. It was a great surprise to Lee O-Rim, who asked how long it took her to complete all 10 quests. The girl sat down on the kitchen floor and said that she had been doing them since the winter break of her 3rd year in high school, about 17 in total, and then Shiavol, and that she said she had almost died on 5 of those quests. This was another shock for Leo Roman. He could not imagine such a huge period of time to complete the quests. Then Kim Shiavol said that she would tell the boyfriend right now that she did not know how she had changed and why it was happening. She even went to the room that created VVR4 and Ergosphere online, but they talked to her like she was crazy. Lee O-Rim then asked if her parents had said anything about their daughter's external changes. But Kim Shiavol said very sadly that those people would not even know if she suddenly disappeared and was cut into pieces. And then the girl said that she was already quite beautiful before the changes, so her appearance did not change much, unlike him. And if anything changed, it was the color of her hair. O-Rim didn't even know what to say to that. He started to explain that he just changed because the Avenger class is better if you are taller, and Kim Shiavol laughed. Does the face really affect the statistics that much? And the guy started to make excuses that his face hadn't changed that much compared to the previous one. Suddenly, a loud knock on the door interrupted the conversation of his classmates. Lee O-Rim and Kim Shiavol immediately stopped their conversation, and the guy asked if it could be a prankster. The girl replied that she thought it was just an ordinary noise, but decided to check it out with her skill. And Shiavol picked up her scepter with a large purple crystal on the tip. Then she lifted it high up and activated the Maze Watchtower skill, which builds an invisible watchtower. Immediately, a tower appeared on the roof of the house where Lee O-Rim and Kim Shiavol were staying, which no one could see, and began surveillance. The girl said that it should work. Thanks to this skill, you can detect users who take the lives of other players if they suddenly start attacking. Lee O-Rim asked if Shiavol used this skill. Did those hunters not notice that they were in this house? The girl explained that this skill is invisible to the normal eye and that the Reaper class has no abilities that can detect this skill. The guy was massaging his shoulder, which he had been injured in the evening while completing a quest. Kim Shiavol noticed this. She was generally observant and attentive to such things. The girl asked O-Rom to bare his torso for a while. The guy blushed and felt uncomfortable with this request. But Kim Shiavol immediately explained that she believes it is strategically correct to treat his injured shoulder now, but Lee O-Rim asked why they had to shoot up for this and what the reason was. Then the classmate said there was no reason, she just wanted to get a golden impression of what she saw. Rome asked if she was a pervert. Later, Shiavol told the guy to calm down and take off his clothes, and she would treat him. And then she started taking off his shirt herself. Finally, Lee O-Rim was sitting on the floor with his torso exposed, and Kim Shiavol was standing behind him with her scepter. She was using some of her skills and told him not to move until she said she was done and warned him that the skill would not work if he moved. And then Kim Shiavol activated the skill Oasis in the desert maze. Lee O-Rim sat politely as she asked. So the skill started to work, and its effect brought great pleasure to the patient. The guy completely relaxed. The girl said that this procedure would take some time because his entire body, including his shoulder, needed to be healed, and she was not a healer, and it was just a buff skill that increased stamina. Lee O-Rim felt his body begin to heal under the influence of the oasis in the desert labyrinth. He was interested in why Kim Shiavol wanted to create a party with him. After all, she already has high-ranked skills, which means that she has nothing to gain from a party with him. And Shiavol laughed and told me that she thought it would be easier for him to give orders because he was a failure before. But the girl immediately explained that it was a joke and that she was going to find out what kind of user he was. As she watched him, studied him, and made notes, she remembered one thing. More precisely, she remembered an event called the Opening of Purgatory. Lee O-Rim also recalled that it was a difficult raid during his 2nd year of high school. Kim Shiavol confirmed that this was the event in which even half a percentage of users failed to complete all the difficult tasks. Many players were unable to cope with the monsters attacking them and were defeated. And while she began to remember Kim Shiavol, she supported the guild as a mercenary. Then, during one of her difficult and seemingly losing battles, she was attacked by monsters from everywhere. The girl recalled how she hadn't noticed one monster, but a player with a long sword rushed to her aid and swung it across the monster's body, splitting it in half. And that player savior was Leo Rim, the one who met him at the time during the opening of Purgatory event. Absolutely all the players were helplessly destroyed due to the absurd complexity of that event. But Leo Rim was running around in the midst of that chaos and undead, and Kim Shiwol met him for the first time. She watched in awe as a strong and skillful player in a black robe with a long sword confidently ran across the battlefield, striking down all the monsters. Kim Shiwol was incredibly surprised that so many players had already died, and he was still throwing punches left and right, skillfully using his skills. And as a result, that player won because he was determined not to give up from the very beginning. Leo Rim listened to this story that Kim Shiwol was telling so enthusiastically and felt uncomfortable with her praise. So, remembering this whole story, the girl clearly decided that she needed such a player in her party because he was a crazy gambler, and then she touched the wound on Rom's shoulder with her scepter, and he was hurt for a moment. Later, he saw the bandage come off and there was no trace of the injury underneath. After the healing, Kim Shiwol sat down next to the boy and said that she also wanted to get closer to someone to whom she could tell everything about herself. Looking into the guy's eyes, she wondered if he was also upset that there was no one who could find out about his alter account, i.e., the alternative of an additional character on the player's account. So now, given the circumstances, it is much easier for her. While Kim Shiwol and Leo Rim were talking about healing and strategizing, the night fell. Somewhere else at the time, the team of players was going through their next quest. One guy was fighting a foot-and-mouth monster. Now he used the skill Ancestral Strike, which increases the attack power 3 times, thanks to the power of Andastor. And immediately the player struck a very powerful blow to the monster, almost neutralizing it. After that, the next shot was for the other player, and she was ready to strike. She activated her skill challenge to step with dirty feet into Owen's abode, which involves lowering the opponent's defense. And then, with a skillful movement, she jumped high and severed the monster's head from its body with a single blow of her sword. After the battle was over, she summarized that they had already managed 20 of them. The girl's name was Yong Sinha, and she belonged to the Duen's Guardian class. Her partner's name was Kang Ikju, and he belonged to the Soul Fighter class. The guy said it was too easy. Sinha then suggested choosing status points as a reward for today, and Kang Ikju agreed. Suddenly, she felt something strange and told her partner about it. Yon Sinha became alarmed and said that somewhere near them someone was using the skill even though there was no quest. The guy immediately asked if they would attack the one who was doing it now. However, Sinha said no, I'll let him forget about it because there were only 50 seconds left, especially since they didn't even know who the users were. They will just have to watch to determine whether they will be a blessing or a curse to their guild. The girl told Kang Ik-ju to mark the coordinates for now and suggested that he come back tomorrow to investigate what it was. Meanwhile, Leo Rim had already fallen asleep and dreamed that he was in an unknown place, a corridor of some building with dim lighting. And suddenly, at the end of this corridor, a nasty, bloody monster appeared. Someone who looked like a human began to crawl out of the monster's interior, looking very disgusting and a little creepy. The next moment, the creature came out completely. It resembled the player who had attacked Rome the day before, but in the form of a monster, and it rushed at the guy. Rim began to run away from the attacker in horror, and the latter pursued the boy, swinging his scepter at him with a scythe that looked like a scythe of a life-taker. The boy ran through the corridors looking for salvation. The monster almost kept up with him. Finally, Leo Rim saw a door ahead with the words Exodus on it, and he was very happy. But when he reached the door and grabbed the handle, he realized that it was locked. There was a small rectangular window on the door through which Leo Rim saw a little boy sitting and playing in the sand. He recognized Baek In-hyun in this boy and started shouting to him and knocking on the door. Father Rome asked the boy to help him open the door because it was impossible for him to do so. The boy In-hyun continued to play with the sand, paying no attention to Leo Rim's request, but he still did not give up hope. He kept knocking and shouting that they had been friends since childhood, so now he asked Baek to help him at least once. Suddenly, little In-hyun began to slowly stand up and seemingly grow into a large teenager at the same time. Then he half-turned to face Leo Rim and continued to do so very slowly. Finally, he turned his head completely around saying that he did not know who was his friend, and Rim saw that half of In-hyun's face was just the face of some horrible monster. And then Leo Rim woke up in a cold sweat from that nightmare, and fortunately it was only a bad dream. The guy sat up on the bed and propped his head with his hand and came back to reality, happy to finally wake up. And then Kim Shiwol called him and asked what happened to him or if he had a bad dream. Rim was embarrassed to see his classmate there and began to cover himself with a blanket. He told Shiwol that she surprised him because she went to sleep in his sister's room. The girl got up and sat on the blanket and said that she just couldn't sleep in someone else's bed. Then Kim Chevol asked what dream he had about Rome and what terrors in it scared him. However, Lee O-rim replied that he had not dreamed anything special. So the morning came and the classmates started to get ready to go out. They bought breakfast. Kim Chevol said that as they had agreed in the evening, she would now choose the quests. So O-rim should start learning the skills to be ready to face any piker. The guy was just finishing his hamburger and said he would start working on himself. And Kim Chewol also told Lee O-rim not to use his skills unnecessarily because the reward would be small if they got penalty points. Then the guy also said that the money he had chosen as a reward the previous day had disappeared and asked if it was because of the penalty points. Kim Chewol replied that one penalty point costs about 10,000 won, so everything is confiscated. And the girl also said that if he takes part in the penalty quest, she, as a member of his party, will also be with him, so it's even more annoying. Lee O-rim understood everything now, and he promised that from now on he would not use his skills unnecessarily. Chevol smiled at him and told him that at least he was good at answering questions. Then she added that she was going home to change and they would meet at school. But Lee O-rim detained the girl a little longer because he remembered something. He said that he had been wondering since last night what she would want if they won first place in this event. And Kim Chevol replied that she wanted to build her own paradise harem with her favorite idols. Lee O-rim almost fell down when he heard this answer, but the girl was quick to assure him that it was not true, but just a joke. Then she told him that if he did well on their next quest, she would tell him about her true wish. In the end, Lee O-rim was left with his unresolved issue, and they parted ways. The guy did try to remind her that she had promised to tell him everything. In the car that was passing by were Yong Sina and Kang Ik-jae, who were probably looking for Lee O-rim and Kim Chewol. Avenger and Maze Master Sina said that judging by their uniforms, they were still schoolchildren. Then the woman used the Queen's Guard skill, a unique passive skill in the Royal Realm without Sunset that allows you to see the skills and characteristics of users and monsters at a short distance. Yon Sina said that it was worth it to go out and look for them while people were going to work. Otherwise, they would have to search all day if they were not lucky. Kang Ik-ju asked what she was going to do. Was she going to hunt them down right now? But Sina said that it will not happen now because there are too many extra eyes at the moment, and they are not so important to hunt for when penalty points are at stake. In addition, Lee O-rim and Kim Chewol belong to classes that are not in their guild, so until they know what the Horizon event is, they should consider recruiting those two to their guild. Kang Ik-ju asked if those students were too young to do this, and suggested simply scaring them as if they were hunting them and thus forcing them to surrender. However, Yeon Sina asked whether age was so important, since the main thing was that Lee O-rim and Kim Chewol were skilled and followed instructions well, because you never know what may be hidden behind an innocent appearance. As a result, Sina suggested that someone from their guild be assigned to the students, and in the meantime, they would observe what these children are really like. It's not too late to think about how to take care of them after all. After Lee's lessons, he decided to study skills and knew that he could use the Ergosphere online skills system as a source because they are the same. Kim Chewol is still a maze master who favors the dealer type. He read the book and saw that the maze master had many useful skills. Her skills, for example, traps, will work very well with the Avenger, who will lure them into them, and skills with a buff can be used in tandem with the Avenger's counterattack skills to deal serial damage. So it was a great match, that is, a matching match or a pair, which means that they will be very effective in a pair. So on the way home from school, O-rim was reading this information and studying when a passerby approached him. There were even two of them, and one of them asked if the boy's name was Lee O-rim from Haejung High School. The guy boldly answered that he was, and he was very concerned that people he did not know knew him. Then a passerby suggested that we talk about Rome for a while. Then he came close to the guys, stabbed him in the stomach and said they had something to talk about. Those strange guys took Lee O-rim to an unfinished building and pushed him inside. As a result, the guy saw that there were 4 bandits in total who wanted to talk to him about something. Then he recognized one of them, Yu Minho, and wondered what they wanted to talk to him about, but he thought nothing of it. The bandits started talking among themselves about whether this was the guy they needed to beat. Yu Minho shouted to Lee O-rim not to even think about running away, because he would only make things worse for himself. And the guy was offered to go home after they all beat him up a bit. Lee O-rim was frantically thinking about what to do since he couldn't use his skills, so did he really need to get ahead of his attackers? But they will continue to torture him endlessly and mock him if he does so. So the guy decided to end it here and now without using his skills. He would just take it upon himself. So the bandits started attacking Lee O-rim, and the boy had to fight back. Orim dealt well with the first attacker, not only dodging his blow but also inflicting damage on him himself. Then the next bandit rushed to attack the boy, but Orim repelled his attack with dignity and beat him. And so each of the attackers got it, and Orim finally realized that he could safely defend himself even without using skills. The guy miscalculated how he dealt with the black monster, and here, after all, there are only people, and it doesn't matter how many of them there are because compared to the monsters Rome had to fight before, these are only weak mobs. You shouldn't rely too much on your skills as you did in the last one-on-one battle. In such battles, even a small part of the Avengers' forces is enough, and he can easily deal with such mobs, as Rim has successfully done now. The guy was so excited that he could easily deal with those bandits and decided to get rid of them all. The bandits were still attacking in turns, thinking that the four of them would overcome one. But we were constantly losing and wondering what was wrong with this guy, why he was fighting so well, and if he was the same loser everyone was talking about. Yu Minho was very angry. He had not expected such a turn of events, as he had planned it to be completely different. The bandits were still attacking, but Rim was much stronger than all of them put together, so Yu Minho swung at the guy from behind with an iron stick he found at the construction site. However, even here, Rim reacted in time and stopped the bandit's blow, which was a complete surprise to Minho. The powerful blow bent the strong iron stick and made it wavy instead of flat. And the very next moment, Rim clenched his fist tightly and punched his attacker in the face with all his might. Yu Minho was extremely angry with Rim because this was not the kind of battle he expected, and he just wanted to make fun of the guy as usual. He tried to get to his feet, but Rim just kicked him back to the ground. Minho got angry, called the guy an animal, and still allowed himself to continue threatening him. Lying defeated on the floor of the unfinished building, the bandit shouted that Rim was already dead, that he would call all the elders he knew and finish him off. Unable to come to terms with his shameful defeat, Yu Minho continued to call Rim a damn loser and shouted that he would kill him. However, Rim was no longer the weak, cowardly boy that Minho liked to bully, and he boldly told the bandit to try to destroy him if he could. Then Rim took his bag and headed out of that building, and suddenly one of the bandits attacked him with a knife. Meanwhile, Lee's sister, Rima, was returning home from work and looked very tired. The girl was looking at the shopping list as she walked and listed that she had bought green onions, of course, bought sauce, so that would be enough for today's lunch. The girl complained that lately she has been so busy that she has no opportunity to cook for her brother and needs to think about his health and feed him well. His sister still did not understand what was happening to him, but at least she was glad that he was not sick. She was walking home quietly, reflecting on her life, when she met her brother, who was also on his way home. She did not expect to meet him here, thinking that he was already waiting for her at home. She also sold herself more thoroughly and saw that the guy was completely drenched in sweat. She was a little worried and asked why he was in such a state. However, Rim laughed and said that there was no need to worry, that he was fine. Then he pointed in the direction of the building where he had just fought with the bandits and said that some guys asked him to play football with them, so he was wet. Fortunately, Rim emerged as the absolute winner after that unfair attack and calmly went home, leaving the bandits lying on the floor. And my sister kept asking me if it was only because of football that he was so sweaty, if he had played so long. Rim smiled and said that he had fun playing after a long break and thought that he was actually sweating so much because he was running away from there so that his sister wouldn't see anything. Then the guy took the bag from his sister's hands and asked what she had bought and if it would be lunch for them. Looking inside the bag, Rim saw a pork brisket, so today they will be grilling meat. My sister looked at her brother without thinking about how he looked now. His words and actions remained exactly the same as before, with the same smile and the same childlike spontaneity. Rim noticed that his sister was thinking about something, so he interrupted her thoughts and asked if she hadn't gotten used to the way he looked now. The sister smiled and asked if her expression betrayed her thoughts. Rim said that it was not quite so easy for him to think so, because she was looking at him closely. The brother and sister headed home, and Rim asked her if she wanted him to look like he used to. But his sister gently grabbed him by the arm and said that she would like him no matter what he looked like, as long as he was okay. The guy sincerely thanked his family member, and it was nice and important for him to hear such words from her. Then the sister asked if Rim had seen any guests last night, but the boy did not admit it, and instead asked why she thought so. The girl said that when she was cleaning her apartment in the morning, she found a lot of long brown hairs. And her hair is not as long and the shade is not the same as hers, which is why my sister thought it was her brother's girlfriend's hair. Rim almost burned with shame, not knowing how to tell his sister that Kim Shawol spent the night at his place. But my sister didn't demand any explanations at all. She just asked him to introduce her to his friend one day. The bandits slowly began to regain consciousness. Yu Minho moaned in pain because his body was covered in bruises, but he still continued to threaten to destroy the damn Lee O-rim. He pulled out his phone and decided to call Baek In-hyun, who was having fun at a party at the time. When In-hyun saw who was calling him, he picked up the phone and went to the window to talk. Yu Minho started yelling into the phone that Baek should intervene because if they let Lee O-rim go, he would make them angry again. Minho believed that Baek In-hyun should personally teach O-rim a lesson so that this weakling would know his place. In-hyun agreed, and he was going to show that weakling the difference in their levels. The next day, after school, Kim Shiwol approached Lee O-rim and offered to walk home together. The girl surprised all her classmates by doing this, because it had never happened before. Shivol's friend, who also heard this proposal, asked where they were going and said that she wanted to go with them. Kim replied that she and Lee O-rim were not going anywhere, they just needed to talk. The two of them have something very important to discuss, and this intrigued her friend even more. Kim Shiwol then told her friend that if everything went as planned, she would tell her about it later. All of my classmates were talking about how Kim Shiwol and Lee O-rim were dating, and how long this strange tandem had been going on, and Baek In-hyun noticed it too. He thought that there was absolutely no way that the beautiful Kim Shiwol could date a loser like Lee O-rim. So Shiwol and O-ram left the school together and stopped to talk on the playground on the way. They were both having drinks with straws, and suddenly the girl asked O-ram if they could really start dating, and the guy jumped in surprise. The guy was frightened and asked why they should start a romantic relationship. Kim Shiwol explained that if they started dating, no one at school would care why they were always talking in private, but O-rim insisted that they shouldn't lie about it. Then the girl calmly replied that if he didn't want to lie, they could actually start dating, which shocked the guy even more. Shiwol looked at O-ram ambiguously and asked if he was willing to date her for real. The guy said that she asked him about it too suddenly and that he needed to think about it a bit. Then Kim Shiwol offered to talk about something else if he needed to think. The girl called the system and said that today at 12:30 she received a quest. A competitive pair quest to suppress to agree to accept it or refuse it with 7 hours and 18 minutes left. Lee O-rim asked if others could participate. Kim Shiwol said that they can, but the reward will only be better for it. In addition to 20 million won, you can get 12 status points, and this is a great chance to level up. But as Lee O-rim noted, it will be much more difficult to cope with the task. Shiwol said that it would be because they compete with other players. And even if there is a 1 in a million chance of a playmaker, in this case, a terrible bloody battle will begin between everyone. Lee O-rim thinks about the fact that he has never worked with Kim Shiwol before and the competition promises to be dangerous. The girl asked him what he was going to do if he thought it would be too dangerous, so they could wait until a less difficult quest appeared. However, Lee O-rim clearly and boldly stated that he wanted to try to take part in such a competition. He then said that he had analyzed his and Shivol's skills and realized that together they could handle any situation. He also added that there was no need to worry about killers because if it came to that, he could easily deal with them. Kim Shiwol smiled back and flirtatiously asked what was wrong with Rome today. He was so confident. In the end, the girl said that they would meet at the place where the quest started tonight. And then the evening came and Lee O-rim came to the appointed place, which was on the roof of a building. Soon Kim Shiwol arrived, and it was already a little chilly outside, so she put on a sleeveless hoodie. She asked her classmate what he thought of the place and if he knew anything about it because knowing the layout would give them an advantage. However, Lee O-rim said that he was completely unfamiliar with the place, so he looked around. The guy said that if they found a back door, it would be easier to plan the route. Kim Shiwol did not understand what the back door was and what it was. Then the guy explained that he meant the door from which monsters usually appear and that it was rectangular. But the girl was still surprised, saying that she had never seen such a door before. And this, in turn, surprised Lee O-rim, who asked if all monsters appear from black rectangular doors. And then, the system appeared in front of their classmates and warned them that the quest would start in 1 minute and the players had to get ready for the battle. Then Kim Shiwol said that they would talk about the back door later, and now they had to finish the quest. Then the girl turned to the system and ordered it to open the page for preparing for the battle. Shiwol decided to equip everything for her heal first, and wondered if she should buy an attack buff or not. Then the girl turned to Lee O-rim and asked him if he needed anything because you can only buy something before the quest starts, and she will buy it for him as well. O-rim said that in that case he would also need something for a heal and a speed buff. Kim Shiwol echoed the positions voiced by her classmate and said that she would send him everything she bought. So I bought the Virgin Mary's Panacea X2, which fully restores defense and stamina, but tastes very bad, but anything bitter is good for health. And I also bought a Hunting Hawk feather, which increases movement speed 4 times in 5 seconds. And those feathers are so soft that you can fall asleep from just touching them. Kim Chevol said that all this is expensive, so tomorrow, Lee O-rim will repay her with strawberry milk and sausage and dough. The guy agreed and sincerely thanked the girl for the purchases. Suddenly, the system gave a signal that 1 minute had passed and the preparatory stage was complete. So the quest for suppression was declared launched, and the newly arrived monster immediately swept over the participants. This monster rushed right over the heads of Kim Chewol and Lee O-rim so fast that they didn't even hear it. Lee O-rim recalled that such a monster is generally known for its frantic speed. It was a nimble wolf, Vaham, with interesting flesh-colored fur and a mane of red strands on his head. Vaham is a kind-hearted tribal god who does not attack unless attacked, and his main attack is a quick throw that simply tears the enemy apart with the wind gust skill. Kim Chevol said that they needed to hurry up and catch up because if they did it now, they would be the first. However, Lee O-rim was against such a rush, saying that if something went wrong, the monster would drag them all over the city, so there must be another way. The boy thought about it for a while and suggested that Kim Chevol make a trap for the nimble wolf Waham. O-rim explained that they can make such a trap if they use the Chevol's skill Deadlock, and then he lures the monster into their trap with his attack. But Kim Chevol was outraged by this proposal, because in his plan he acts as a bait, and this is too risky. However, Lee O-rim said with confidence that he was ready, and that vigilantes get stronger when they are attacked. Then he told Chevol that as soon as she finished making the trap, she should let him know, and he would bring the swift wolf Waham to her. Lee O-rim came up with this plan and immediately started implementing it, and Kim Chewol didn't even have time to say anything else. She was angry with her classmate for doing this because it was his idea and he decided to act on his own, despite her warnings. The guy took all the danger of this quest on himself, as he was determined to do the most dangerous things alone. The nimble wolf Waham ranks first among all existing monsters in terms of speed, but is not very strong in general. Lee O-rim thought that if he lured Waham into a trap, they could easily defeat him. While the boy was chasing the monster, he was indulging in such illusions. Another player suddenly began to overtake him. It was a girl they were moving at an incredible speed. Lee O-rim was just shocked. He thought that she belonged to a special speed class, the Windrunners, and it was indeed a girl who belonged to this class, and her name was Hwang Kyu-ri. A girl running past Lee O-rim looked at him and wondered whether he was a knight or a swordsman, but this information was not very important to her, because they are all too slow compared to her, and Hwang Kyu-ri rushed forward, leaving O-rim behind. The boy watched her unhappily, realizing that Kyu-ri wanted to take advantage of their speed difference to win the quest. Lee O-rim quickly decided that in this case, he could not stand still either. And the guy activated his skill for this because the time for revenge comes while the enemy is still alive. So Hwang Kyu-ri managed to catch up with the nimble wolf Waham in the right place at the right time. The girl activated this ice wind blade skill and wounded the monster's face, but that was only the beginning. Kyu-ri used another skill, Blade of Furious Storm, and Waham howled in pain. With this skill, she stunned a nimble wolf and then called her partner, Yeon-sun. This guy was supposed to send the monster flying a bit with his combo pulse, and it was just right to take the chance since Waham couldn't move now. Hwang Kyu-ri's partner Yeon-sung-oh was a builder, waiting for his time to attack the monster while Kyu-ri was catching up. So the fast wolf Waham stopped stunned and had no opportunity to counterattack, and Yeon-sung used his Heavenly Wall skill. This skill involved creating a glowing wall to pacify and delay the opponent. So Waham found himself trapped in a monster roaring, unable to escape the attack. Then, Yeon-sung was going to use his combo as he and his partner had agreed earlier, activating the Tactical Shaft skill. But suddenly, the boy saw another player approaching the fast wolf above the monster, Lee O-rim. Hwang Kyu-ri screamed that it was the same guy with a sword she had met while chasing the monster, and she wondered when he had managed to catch up with her. Lee O-rim used the skill. The time of vengeance comes while the enemy is still alive, with his agility increasing by 1.5 times, while his defense gradually decreases until it reaches 0. At the moment, O-rim's defense was about 20, and if he loses this time, he won't be able to catch up with the monster later. The guy had only one chance. He decided to use the Sword of the Spirit of Vengeance skill, which reduces defense to 0 for 5 seconds, significantly increasing the chance of a critical hit. So Lee O-rim used his arsenal of skills and abilities to attack the swift wolf Waham, and the guy did manage to wound the monster, but not critically, and he was sure that he failed to deliver a critical blow because Waham has a very high dexterity score. And then Hwang Kyu-ri could not stand it, and shouted at Lee O-rim what he was doing here, why he was interfering in their fight. The girl continued to scold how O-rim dared to interfere with them, and try to steal their loot when they had almost got that monster. Lee O-rim stopped and said that the quest is competitive, so what's the difference if everyone intervenes when it's convenient for them? However, Kyuri did not let up. She said that there is such a thing as good manners and then asked how he would feel if someone destroyed the monster he stunned. Then Lee O-rim thought about it and said that in that case he had really acted very badly and apologized for it. After that brief apology, O-rim said that he would not do that next time and hurried away. Hwang Kyuri was very angry with him, calling him an arrogant idiot, but Lee O-rim had already run on his way. And Yeon Sung tried to calm his partner down, saying that O-rim was right, that the quest was competitive and that it was part of the game to annoy the opponents. And then he added that this is why they should also be less polite to other players. Yeon Sung suggested using these features of the competitive quest to his advantage. And the guy activated the skill stone mansions of the royal family and directed its effect at Lee O-rim. In an instant, O-rim found himself locked in a shelter used in emergencies and realized that Yeon Sung had used this skill to stop him. The guy tried to cut down the walls of the shelter, but as he thought, it didn't work because they only respond to attacks from the outside, so he would have to wait until the time to use that skill was up. However, Lee O-rim knew that it would be too late to return to the competition, so he decided to use a single penetrating attack, Red Spikes, until the barrier that had formed around him fell. The Red Thorn skill can penetrate a wall and thus attack the shelter from the outside to destroy it. Of course, it will take a lot of time because the damage from those spikes is small, but it will still be faster than just standing there and waiting. Lee O-rim was extremely determined to get out of that trap and catch up with his rivals. And finally, a crack appeared in the wall of the royal family's stone mansion, and O-rim got out. The guy was happy that he managed to get out of the hideout faster than he expected, and now he had a chance to catch up with the other players. Lee O-rim was about to run off in search of Waham, the nimble wolf, when he stopped when he saw Hwang Kyuri and Yeon Sun. The guy came closer to them and saw that the players were just standing there, not moving, but they seemed to be still alive. Then Lee O-rim decided to ask Oleg himself what had happened here and whether they had lost the monster they were hunting. Yeon Sung, who stood there like a mesmerized man, said that they had not lost Waham. The boy continued to look into the distance, even though there was no one there. Moreover, according to Sun, he was confident that he would continue to fight him until that moment. But then suddenly the monster just disappeared, and it surprised the players so much that they froze. Lee O-rim did not understand how it could happen that a huge monster simply disappeared without a trace. It could not be. While the players were talking to each other, the nimble wolf Waham quietly approached them from above. All three players turned in his direction and watched in horror as the monster approached Lee O-rim, realized that it looked like teleportation, but it couldn't be. There is no such skill as teleportation in this game, and there is some kind of mistake here. At first, the monster was slowly climbing down the wall and then abruptly opened its terrible jaws and rushed to attack the players. Since Waham is the fastest known monster, he was at his victim's side in no time and quickly grabbed Yeon Sun with his huge jaws. The sharp teeth sank into the boy's body and Hwang Kyuri immediately rushed to save her partner, using the Mega Typhoon dance skill, which quadruples the user's attack speed for 18 seconds, after which he freezes for 5 seconds. The girl was determined and acted very quickly without even hesitation, but the nimble wolf Vaham suddenly disappeared again. As a result, she found Tomas on the battlefield alone, not knowing where the opponent had gone. Hwang Kyuri was seriously furious, and in desperation she shouted at the monster to return to the battle immediately. Lee O-rim saw that things were bad, and he did not expect that the nimble wolf Waham would be endowed with such a powerful skill. If the monster can teleport, it can easily escape from the trap that Kim Chevol will prepare for it. This means only one thing. You need to think carefully and quickly about everything now and change your strategy on the fly. Otherwise, his partner Chevol will be in great danger if she catches Vaham in her trap. Meanwhile, Kim Chevol has already completed preparations for the activation of her trap, and now she just has to wait for her partner. Lee O-rim was actively thinking at this time. He realized that until he figured out the monster's teleportation, Chevol's trap would be completely useless. So he first needed to disable Waham's teleportation ability and then lure him to Kim. Soon, the nimble wolf reappeared on the battlefield holding a bloody Yeon Sun in his teeth. When the monster got closer to the players, it spat the boy out on the floor, and it was a scary sight. Hwang Kyuri screamed loudly and called her partner's name, but the guy didn't answer. And then the girl realized that she had temporarily lost the ability to move because she had used the skill dance of the Mega Typhoon. Meanwhile, the monster was approaching. It opened its mouth again and moved directly towards Kyuri. But then Lee O-rim used his skill devotion to revenge anti-barrier. Thus, he found himself right in the path of the nimble wolf Waham to the currently unfortunate and weak Hwang Kyuri. The girl did not understand why Lee O-rim was helping her survive now, since they were participating in a competitive quest and therefore were a priori against each other. However, the boy continued to restrain the monster's attack to keep it away from Huang Q-ri. He explained his actions by saying that he had previously promised her that in the future he would watch his manners. With his powerful skill, Devotion to Vengeance Anti-Barrier, Li O-Rome managed to repel Waham's attack. But the monster began to run away from the battlefield again, somehow behaving strangely in this quest. Li O-Rim, in turn, wondered why the nimble wolf was just running away now. Couldn't he still teleport? Though perhaps it was because he had been dealt a lot of damage. Huang Q-ri said that she could have caught up with the monster if running with the wind hadn't been in a cooldown, meaning that a certain amount of time must pass before the skill can be used again. This phrase prompted Li O-Rim to answer the mystery of why Waham didn't use teleportation, because this monster skill also has its own cooldown. And then the guy's phone beeped, and he took it out to read the message. It was Kim Cheval who wrote to him that the trap they had agreed on was ready to be used. Li O-Rim had a great plan and suggested that Huang Q-ri enter into a treaty. The girl was interested in what it would consist of, and O-Rim said that he would give her the panacea, and she would help him in return. Huang Q-ri was not happy with this proposal, because panacea is an ordinary item that can be bought with money, so does he really think that he can conclude a contract with it? Suddenly, her wounded partner, Yeon-sun, called out from the floor and she immediately ran to him. Q-ri sat down next to Sun, touched him lightly and asked if he was okay, if he was still alive. The girl complained that her partner had no chilkas, but she asked him again. Li O-Rim intervened and said that if Yong-sun had had the chops, Q-ri wouldn't have been confused and wouldn't have used the Mega Typhoon dance when her partner was bitten by Waham. Then the guy added that he doesn't like to play with people's lives, but now his life is on the line, so he can't give panacea for free. Li O-Rim explained that he also wanted to protect his partner during this quest. That's why he insists on signing a contract so that Huang Q-ri can help him, and he can give her the panacea in return. Q-ri still didn't know what the right thing to do would be because they were all participating in a competitive quest. Suddenly, Yeon-sung came forward and asked his partner to agree to Li O-Rim's terms and help him. After all, their lives are at stake in this game. Of course, competition is good, but survival is more important. So he suggested we try it anyway because cooperation is one of the game's components. In the end, Huang Q-ri agreed and told Yeon-sun to forget that his plan would make them suffer. However, Li O-Rim smiled and assured her that there was no reason to worry. He said that he himself would be in greater danger and offered her what he had promised under the contract, the panacea. And then, O-Rim announced the first part of his new plan, which was to be live baiting. Huang Q-ri's task was to aggravate the monster as much as possible and direct the monster's aggression towards her, pretending to hunt it. Then, in this way, lure him to the fork in the road where the second half of the plan begins, and that's all Huang Q-ri had to do. So the girl went to look for the nimble wolf Waham because she had to find him first. When she saw the monster moving down the road from the roof, she said it was time to act. Huang Q-ri used the Furious Stormblade skill on him and began to tease Waham. The monster saw the girl and prepared to attack. He is already very well aggro, and he can counterattack with teleportation. So, if she attacks him again, she must immediately go to the agreed meeting place. Huang Q-ri saw that the nimble wolf Waham was just running after her and not teleporting yet. So now it was time for the second part of Li O-Rim's plan. The monster had to be cornered. And in that corner, Waham was waiting for a surprise from Yeon-sung, who was tasked with attacking the enemy. The guy activated his skill wall of the Sentry Castle to stop the swift wolf Waham and covered himself with his shield. As soon as the skill was triggered, the monster had nowhere to retreat, and Yong-sun created an ideal arena for the battle. So now, finally, the final part of the plan for Rome was to be hunted. Here, in this corner where the nimble wolf Waham was stuck, Li O-Rim himself entered the fray and activated the flower skill, a spiteful combo attack. The guy skillfully used his abilities and knowledge and thoughtfully followed his plan. He realized that his hunt would not end there, but the quest continued. In this game, the hunt for the nimble wolf Wahama took Li O-Rim quite a while, and the attacks did not go well because of the monster's agility. Therefore, in order to successfully complete the hunt for Waham, you need to lure him into Kim Shawal's trap and reduce his agility no matter what. But there was something else to be done before the monster fell into the trap set for him. Li O-Rim had to make the nimble wolf use his teleportation skill. As O-Rim had already noticed, Waham can teleport only twice in a row, and that's exactly what happened when the wolf suddenly disappeared. This means that you need to withstand 2 attacks of the monster, after which he will be forced to run away to save himself. So Li O-Rim gathered all his spirit and actively attacked Waham over and over again, causing him some damage. This is the only way they can overcome this powerful enemy in a competitive quest and win. Li O-Rim was not even afraid of being injured at all. He was only getting stronger. The guy used his next skill, flame of vengeance and mercilessly struck his opponent. Some people watched this battle from afar and were surprised that Leo Rim decided to go against Waiham himself and lure him into a trap. There were two observers, one of whom was wearing cute pajamas and was quite interested in watching that difficult battle. His partner told him to stop doing stupid things and watch normally because, as the head of the guild said, they needed to make sure that this was really a player who had the ability to open the black door. Meanwhile, the fierce battle between Leo Rim and the swift wolf Wahan continued. Now, the guy has used the skill. Revenge is the future flame, in which each attack reduces health by 18%, but the attack power increases by 2.5 times. So now was the first attack by Leo Rim had to closely monitor the number of attacks. The monster was getting more and more damaged over and over again because of Rom's constant attacks. Then it was time to attack Waham for the second time, and this time the blow was 2.5 times more powerful. This blow caused enormous damage to the nimble wolf, and to save himself, he simply disappeared from the battlefield. This means that he used his teleportation skill to stay one more time, and everything was going exactly according to Leo Rim's plan. Since the guy doesn't know how Waham will attack next time, he has to rely on luck. Leo Rim stood alert because the enemy could attack him at any moment, but he did not move from his place. The monster was in no hurry to resume its attacks, and Rim stood waiting and listened intently. The guy even called out to his opponent to show him his sharp fangs once again, and suddenly the monster appeared unexpectedly and began to attack from behind. However, Leo Rim, who had already studied the enemy's behavior a bit, was not caught off guard. The very next moment, the nimble wolf Vahem completely grabbed the boy with his terrible huge mouth. Leo Rim was expecting the monster to bite him, so he used his passive skill Flower that blooms at sunset. The guy just needed the enemy to grab him with his fangs, so now he used the ultimatum skill. This skill is called Pawan for the dead. This fight was very cruel. Nimble Wolf. Vahem is a very strong opponent. When the skill started to activate, Leo Rim was still between the monster's strong jaws. He tried with all his might to escape from Waham's jaws so that he would not sink his sharp fangs completely into his body. Finally, Leo Rim Pawan's ultimatum skill for the dead worked, and the nimble wolf Waham received another powerful blow. After that, the monster once again disappeared from the battlefield and Rim fell to the ground as he managed to get out of the wolf's jaws. So, the nimble wolf Waham used his teleportation skill again, and this was the second time in a row. Leo Rim rejoiced that everything was going as he had planned. The enemy had used all his teleportation by now, so he had to do the last thing. Now, together with Rom, Yeon Sung joined the battle against the monster and was the first to see the wolf that had already reappeared. Wounded, tired, and angry, Vahem stood in front of the boys ready to attack. But then the monster turned around and started to run away. Yeon Sung shouted that they had almost succeeded in doing what they wanted, and then there was this twist. However, Leo Rim knew that the swift wolf Waham was now running in the direction of Kim Shi-wol's trap, so they had not lost at all. The guy realized that their party would win if he destroyed the monster while it was trapped. Suddenly, Hwang Kyu-ri ran past him right after the monster, and she used her Run with the Wind skill again, which increases her speed and agility 4 times. The girl turned to Leo Rim and said that she had helped him and now the last blow was for her after all. It was a competitive quest. Hwang Kyu-ri added that the boy shouldn't be too upset about it because it was just a game. However, Leo Rim didn't even think about getting upset with him, and he had a plan for that. He knew perfectly well that their party would win this quest anyway, and he would use Panacea and the Feathers of the Hunting Hawk to do so. He was going to increase his defense with Panacea and increase his speed with the Feathers of the Hunting Hawk. Moreover, Leo Rim has a skill that increases his speed by reducing his defense. After all, the time for revenge comes while the enemy is still alive. So the boy activated his skills and abilities and ran after the swift wolf Waham, passing Hwang Kyu-ri on the way. The girl's hat was blown off her head by the force of the wind from the pursuit of Leo Rim, and she thought, who the hell was that jerk with the sword? Hwang Kyu-ri was shocked by his speed. It was incredible. Finally, Rim came across the nimble wolf Waham, who was tightly bound and unable to escape. The monster was trapped by Kim Shi-vol, a girl who used the skill Overly Tenacious Maze, which allows you to reduce the ability and dexterity of the victim until he leaves the radius of the skill. Leo Rim saw that he didn't even need to activate his skills according to his calculations. Kim Shi-vol had to activate the buff for attacks, which she did. When Leo Rim told her the plan of action if the monster was trapped, Shi-vol agreed with him. The girl stood nearby and activated her Maze Master skill Dragon Strength, fills the maze with an attack buff. So Leo Rim simply entered the final crushing battle for the monster inside Kim Shi-vol's maze. When the nimble wolf Waham was lying defeated, Leo Rim exhaled a little more and all would have been lost if not for the speed buff. He would not have been able to deliver the last blow. Afterwards, Kim Chevol came up to him and asked how he had found out. After all, Lee O-rim bought this buff in preparation for the quest. Did he really know in advance that it would be a speed quest? The guy replied that of course he did not know that. Moreover, he did not even realize that their opponent would be the one who runs with the wind. And then Lee O-rim explained that he just thought to himself that he couldn't possibly have thought that Kim Chewol would be in danger during the quest. So in that case, the only way he could support her was to run to her as quickly as possible, which is why he asked for the speed buff. The girl secretly smiled to herself and said aloud what an annoying and arrogant idiot Lee O-rim was. And then she said that since they had completed the quest thanks to him sticking his nose in everything, she would still praise him. And now the system appeared in front of my classmates as this competitive quest was completed. A congratulatory message appeared on the screens, announcing that Kim Chewol and Lee O-rim had won first place in this competition. And since they completed the secret quest, which required 45 minutes to complete, they received 3 high-quality loot boxes. This reward pleased the classmates even more, and then the system displayed the results and ranks on the screen. Kim Chewol and Lee O-rim began to read the information with interest and were very surprised by some of it. It said they were the first of 3 teams to think about it. Lee O-rim said that he did not see anyone else during the quest except the team of the one who runs with the wind. This means that another group was hiding somewhere on the territory of the competitive quest. And these were the 2 men whom the guild sent to observe Lee O-rim, not to take direct part. The men saw that the Avenger has good intuition, and the Maze Master is well-versed in his skills. But on the other hand, they only tamed 1 Waham, and this does not prove that they are capable enough to join the guild. However, one of the men said that this quest was not an ordinary Waham, but a unique one that could teleport. Therefore, considering how many people from their guild died because of unique monsters, in his opinion, Kim Chewol and Lee O-rim did a great job. And then that man said that he would give the Labyrinth Master 9,229 points and the Avenger 9,879 points. Another man asked what kind of numbers are these that it is even impossible to understand whether this is a good score or not. His partner explained that it was out of 10,000 points and suggested that he also rate Kim Chewol and Lee O-rim, but this range was strange to the other man, and he said that he would wait to make an assessment for now, as he did not have enough information to do so. The man will decide after he finds out how this fight ends, but his partner does not understand what fight we are talking about if the quest has already ended. However, the man confidently said that nothing was over yet, because right now a play killer was about to appear in the quest. Meanwhile, Kim Chewol and Lee O-rim stood calmly in front of the system screens and thought about the choice of the award. The guy asked his partner what reward she was going to choose, and he remembers that she was going to be pumped, so he probably chose points. But Kim Chewol said she would choose money because she wanted to buy a time difference generator. Lee O-rim was a little surprised because the time difference generator is an expensive, first-class item that is very difficult to obtain even in the game. But Kim Chewol said that it can be used to turn back time for one object, which is why it is very useful in a battle with a dangerous enemy or when someone is seriously injured. Chewol summarized that it looks like you will have 2 lives in the game just in case. Lee O-rim agreed, because they play at the most difficult level. If someone dies, it's forever. So of course it's easier if you know you have a second chance. The classmates were standing in front of their screens, thinking about their rewards, when they heard a strange sound. It was Hwang Kyu-ri and Yeon-soon who approached them, and the girl clapped her hands in congratulation of the winners, while she said to herself that they had been an absolute loser. Kyu-ri thought she would be able to deal the final blow to the monster and win, but in the end, they were beaten. Kim Chewol asked curiously who they were, and O-rim replied that they had competed with them and helped each other a little. Hwang Kyu-ri then pointed to Lee O-rim's partner and recalled what he had said about her. The girl slightly distorted O-rima's words, saying that the guy was talking about having a woman whom he was obliged to protect at the cost of his life. She laughed too, but Lee O-rim corrected him that he was talking about his partner wrong. Then Yeon-sung approached O-rim, stretched out his hand to him, and said that no matter what, he was grateful for his help. At least they were in second place and that most importantly no one died. Yi-sung said he wanted to add Lee O-rim to his friends, so he asked if the guy would accept his request. So O-rim accepted the application, and now they can see each other's class and status, as well as find out if they are currently participating in the quest. And then Kim Chewol interrupted the conversation and said that if it's just about friends, everything is fine. And then she added sternly that they should not hope for cooperation because they do not know what kind of people they really are. Then Yeon-sung raised his hands and told Chewol not to worry about it because they were not asking to be their friends because they wanted something from them. They just like the game. It's like an extreme sport. They can't even participate in really difficult quests because both of their classes are at the bottom. So Yeon Sung reiterated that they shouldn't worry, they just needed friends to play with. Lee Oh-rim decided to ask his partner's opinion because he considered Hwang Kyu-ri and Yeon Soon to be good people. Kim Chevol said that if that's what he thought after talking to them, she would not interfere. But she said to herself that she didn't want to be his friend, and it was enough that she was in the same party with him. Lee Oh-rim agreed with his partner, so now he will have 2 new friends in the game. Then Yong Sung said that there was not much time left to collect the rewards and that he would send the application to his friends. While the guy was creating the request, the system showed him that there was a danger of an unknown user intruding on the screen. Suddenly, an unexpected guest appeared out of nowhere on the territory of the quest. All players immediately realized that a play killer had appeared in the quest. Yeon Sung immediately grabbed hold of his shield and activated the Century Castle wall skill to buy some time. He said that he would detain the play killer with his wall and that Lee Oh-rim and Kim Shi-wol should hurry up and collect their rewards. And then the guy shouted louder that if the winners didn't do it in time, trouble would happen. Yeon Sung didn't have a time to finish because the play killer destroyed the wall of defense that the guy had activated. The bastard removed Sun from the battlefield, but he was immediately attacked by Hwang Kyu-ri. The girl was waving her 2 knives and shouting for the play killer to go to hell, but the bastard didn't give up. He activated his skill Spearman's Tactics, Chapter 5. Then he added the Ocean of Spears skill Wave Tactics, and immediately a powerful wave rushed at Hwang Kyu-ri. In the end, the girl was wounded in the shoulder because the play killer was very fast, and she did not understand how a spearman could match the speed of the one running with the wind. Hwang Kyu-ri called the bastard an animal and asked him how long he had been playing. The next moment, as the play killer was about to attack Kyu-ri, he was suddenly tightly chained. It was Kim Chevol who activated her skill, joking that she had forgotten that she had left another trap here, and now the play killer had fallen into it. She also ironically told the attacker to watch his feet when he was fighting. And then the girl added, laughing, that he shouldn't look at his feet but at what was going on above his head. And on top of the playmaker, Lee Oh-rim was already preparing to attack with the Maze Master skill. The note left by the dead in the maze buffs the attack plus 120% to speed and plus 20% to any selected skill. Lee Oh-rim skillfully attacked the playmaker and with a sharp blow separated his elbow from his body. Now the striker was deprived of the opportunity to fully attack the players, as he was missing half of his arm. The only thing the uninvited guest managed to do was to flee the battlefield as quickly as possible. After the attacker disappeared from sight, Lee Oh-rim told Kim Shi-wol to heal the other players. However, the girl was suspicious and asked her partner if he was going to chase the play killer. Oh-rim replied that the attacker could only make it look like he was retreating to attack again, so he would follow him and distract him as long as possible so that Shi-wol could heal Yeon Sung and Hwang Kyu-ri. But Kim Chevol categorically refused to agree to this, realizing what such persecution could mean. The girl warned her partner that he could die if he made a mistake. So I decided to give him some valuable advice. If he was going to really fight, he shouldn't waste time. He should just destroy his opponent and that's it. And if Lee Oh-rim is returned injured, she will tell him what she wanted as a reward for winning the quest. After those words, the guy ran as fast as he could to catch up with the play killer to destroy him once and for all. It didn't take long for Rome to find the striker Lee Oh-rim. The playmaker was sitting nearby and seemed to be waiting for something. This surprised the guy a bit, and when he came closer, the play killer stood up and said that he was expecting the Avenger to come to him. He immediately began to attack the boy, but Lee Oh-rim was ready to attack with his sword in hand. He skillfully deflected the playmaker's attack, and when he fell to the ground, told him that he frankly did not want to hurt anyone, regardless of who his opponent was. But no matter how hard he tries, he can't stand to see such garbage as that attacker who causes harm to other people. So Lee Oh-rim told the playmaker to choose. Now he has the opportunity to leave here quietly and continue to live his life quietly without sticking out. Or he will continue to fight and will be immediately defeated like a common monster. And then the play killer came forward and said that when the Avenger deprived him of part of his arm without any hesitation, he had some hope. But now, just as he thought, Lee Oh-rim turned out to be just a regular nerd who only knows how to show off. In the playmaker's hand, a yellow ball appeared, which the attacker threw and was enveloped in a yellow glow. Lee Oh-rim did not know what it was. And then he saw that it was a time difference generator, and now the attacker was using it to regenerate his lost arm. This time difference generator turns back the clock, and the play killer took advantage of it until the spearman activated the field, and now it has been healed and restored. It was only when the one-on-one skill was activated that Lee Oh-rim realized what was going on. It turns out that this insidious play killer acted according to his well-thought-out plan from the very beginning. He did not attack recklessly. Now the attacker had 2 full arms again and was happy to stretch them. And then, without hesitation, he rushed to attack Lee O-rim, intending to finish the guy on the spot. The play killer attacked the guy waving his black spear, and O-rim was forced to fight back. The play killer laughed at him that after all those loud statements, the guy turned out to be so sluggish. He shouted at O-rim, did he really think that he could just lose his arm with impunity? Lee O-rim realized that after activating the one-on-one skill, his speed and strength dropped, and this skill reduces the attack power and agility of a target inside the field by 30%. In addition, the play killer is fast enough to compete with the one that runs with the wind. So Lee O-rim knew that he couldn't relax for a second with such an opponent, otherwise he would be finished. The striker activated another of his skills, Halberd. He was a strong player. The fight turned out to be very intense. Lee O-rim didn't expect the play killer to be so powerful. The guy deflected the opponent's blow but still took damage, but Halberd and one-on-one have no effect, which allows you to ignore the defense. It was very strange for Lee O-rim. At first, he did not understand what was happening, and the playmaker continued to attack the guy and almost unhindered by strikes one after another. It looked like the play killer was using the totem effect with his spear Albard. Lee O-rim realized that his opponent had very good basic parameters and a great understanding of when to use a skill or item. Perhaps it's because he's been playing this game for quite some time, as if he were a master among the play killer community. These thoughts were in the mind of Lee O-rim, who faced that attacker on the battlefield after completing the quest. The play killer kept laughing with the guy and asking him what was wrong with him, why he was so passive, why he couldn't outrun him in speed, and why he was probably just going to shorten the distance. The attacker shouted with derision that it was very reckless of Lee O-rim to think that he could survive in this fight with such skills. Then he activated another skill, Spearman Tactics. Chapter 1, Spear Shout, a focused attack. He immediately directed his attack at Lee O-rim, and then decided that the guy was finished because he thought he was torn into small pieces and started laughing and calling O-rim a loser. And then I saw that the guy came out from under the smoke screen unharmed, so the fight continued. The play killer laughed and provoked the boy, saying that he simply could not beat him and therefore decided to run away. But he definitely wouldn't let him do it, and he said that Lee O-rim couldn't even run away properly. So the attacker activated the next skill, Spearman's Tactics. Chapter 2, Spearman's Sentence Wire. And then he directed the effect of this skill at his opponent while the guy continued to run. Playkiller expected that after using this skill, Lee O-rim would be defeated and destroyed. Therefore, he was already practically anticipating his victory and striking his opponent, Lee O-rim. Meanwhile, did not counterattack him, but used the skill of unwavering damage absorption. The guy stopped for a moment. He guessed that the enemy would want to use the wire if he realized that he was trying to leave the field of action one-on-one. Lee's opponent O-rima was now a master among playmakers, and it is obvious that he will use standard combinations of skills. Thanks to the fact that the guy anticipated this and used invincibility to absorb damage, he can compensate for the nerf, i.e. the reduction and weakening of the characteristics in the game of his attack through one-on-one. Suddenly, the playmaker came to his senses when he saw a specific stance taken by Lee O-rim. Meanwhile, the guy activated the skill eye for an eye, a paired skill of unyielding that simulates 80% of the skill that the user was attacked with. Lee O-rim couldn't avoid the fixed effect field, but he'll give his opponent back everything he got from it. So, the Spearman's Spear Sentence skill was dealt, and the Avenger began to give a powerful rebuff to the Playkiller's attacks. The blow hit the attacker very hard, especially since he was not expecting a counterattack from his opponent. The Playkiller got angry that Lee O-rim started responding to his attacks and used an ultimatum skill, World Conquest Fever, which provides an increase in attack power and the ability to pierce defenses by 270% for 18 seconds. The Playkiller decided that this would be his final blow to his opponent, after which he should be destroyed. Lee O-rim stood waiting to receive a new blow and counterattack the enemy with dignity. As soon as the Playcaller did his dirty work, O-rim regrouped and prepared. However, this blow was extremely strong and powerful, so it caused obvious damage to the guy, and he was very hurt. Meanwhile, the Playkiller continued to cackle and shout that the Avenger was finally finished and could run away, if he could do it. But Lee O-rim was just biding his time. He knew what he was doing, and so he tried to hold out. And then, the attacker finally realized that something was going wrong with his plan, and it was the timing of the one-on-one skill. The duration of this skill is 200 seconds, and both opponents knew it. Lee O-rim said that given some of the differences, this time is just enough, and it's more than enough to not lose to your opponent even after using the nerf. Playkiller shouted that the Avenger was a loser and was talking nonsense, and he continued to try to convince himself that he had already won and destroyed Lee O-rim. However, the guy told him that all his attacks were now useless without nerfs and other traps. Lee O-rim shouted at the playmaker that he was no match for him and dealt him a powerful crushing blow that he did not expect. The attacker fell weakly to the ground, unable to get to his feet, but still continued to curse Lee O-rim. The guy approached him with his sword pointed at him and threatened him not to even intend to use anything, because he should know about it if he has been playing this game for a long time. Lee O-rim said that the difference in the abilities of the Avenger and the Spearman cannot be fixed with just a couple of items. The Playkiller was lying there moaning because he had lost, and O-rim asked him why he was doing all this. Even if we call it Playkill, it is no longer a game but a reality, and it is a deliberate deprivation of life of another person. Lee O-rim asked what the playmaker got out of it besides the rewards for the game's events, but maybe he just likes to torment others. The attacker just lay there and listened, and now he huffed and puffed with derision and said that Lee O-rim was an optimistic idiot. He asked the boy if his family members recognized him after the dramatic changes, but his life was taken away from him, and he again viciously called Lee O-rim an optimistic idiot. Playkiller said that after he began to look like his game character, his friends and family did not recognize him. He feels as if he has long since passed away, so why should he care what he does and how he does it? And he doesn't care about any quests or events. He doesn't know what happened to him, but he knows one thing: he will destroy everyone. And the Playkiller shouted frantically that he would put an end to all this, as he saw no other way out. And then the attacker collapsed completely to the ground, and a part of his back came off. Lee O-rim was watching with horror, and he recognized that this part was a weapon. This weapon, the scythe of the one who takes life, belongs to the attacker Lee. O-rim already had the misfortune of meeting after his previous quest. And suddenly, that attacker appeared, and it was a girl. And she said that she thought that the vigilante was already finished, but he surprised her. Then she took her weapon and stepped on the body of the previous Playkiller. This girl belonged to the Reaper class, and so she and Lee O-rim met for the second time in a short time. The girl received half the points and all the items of the player who was just destroyed. Then she gave Lee O-rim a wicked look and said that he would be next. The guy took up his sword and asked her if she was the same as the previous destroyed Playkiller. The girl didn't quite understand the question, so Lee O-rim clarified whether she was also taking everyone's life because she had lost everything because of this game. The girl lazily asked what he was talking about, what he wanted to tell you in words. Then the Reaper replied that she had no reason to hunt at all and that she had already told him this. She also said that both in reality and in the game, she just does everything to win because she wants to, and immediately began to attack Lee O-rim. The guy noticed that she was much faster than she was before. Maybe she had improved her level. He pointed his red thorns at her, and another devastating battle ensued. The Reaper was suffering from thorns that were causing her a lot of damage. She tried to dodge and got very angry. Based on this, she activated one of her scary skills, and a skull appeared behind her. Lee O-rim saw this for the first time, and he did not know what to expect from this battle and what else the Reaper could surprise him with. And suddenly, something strange came out of the mouth of that skull. It was aimed at O-rim and hit him, causing him damage. The boy recovered. He was shocked because this skill did not belong to the Reaper at all. But the girl who appeared shook her head sadly, but with a smile, and said that she had missed this time. Although she aimed very well, she probably just got too excited and made a mistake. And then, Lee O-rim realized that he was now dealing with a necromancer, and the battle was becoming increasingly dangerous. Suddenly, the guy heard a voice from the side, a player telling the necromancer not to talk nonsense because it was not the first time this had happened to her. And then, that player added that the girl's skills just sucked and called her a complete loser. The girl laughed and boldly asked him if he wanted to get rid of his shameful life. That newly arrived player was a butcher, at least that's what it looked like to Lee O-rim, who wondered who they were and on whose side they were fighting. And suddenly, right in front of the butcher's face, the Reaper swiped the blade of her weapon with the skulls. He asked her what she was doing and why she was swinging at him so dangerously. Then the Reaper replied that these should be her words, and in the end she warned him that if he interfered with her, he would pay with his life. And the butcher said that she should understand him correctly, that they were here solely for the sake of the spearman, and that this whole meeting was an elementary accident. And he is not going to take away her prey from her because the basis of their cooperation was precisely this: not to move each other's prey. The butcher then asked if the Reaper might need help because they also wanted to deal with the Avenger because he had taken their jobs away from them. The Reaper said she didn't care, let them do as they please, and she decided to resume the fight with Lee O-rim. The girl was very determined because she had a grudge against the Avenger because of her recent adventure on a conquest quest. She said that she would separate his head from his body anyway and rush to attack. Lee O-rim did not expect that he would have to fight so much against injustice even after this competitive quest. The Reaper's attacks were reinforced by her assistance. the necromancer had already begun to use her abilities. She used the bone needles skill and launched them at Lee Orima, the guy trying his best to defend himself. And the butcher was there when he used the relaxing slaughter skill against the Avenger, a critical strike, and rushed at the guy with incredible force, making the stones fly. The necromancer laughed out loud and decided that after such a blow from Leo Rome, the end had definitely come. But when everything dawned, the girl saw another player next to the Avenger and the butcher standing further away. The newcomer said that he never thought he would have to fight in his pajamas, and that he was very ashamed of it. And then he added that despite this small detail, he landed very well. That player used the Dragon Sword Alter skill, which negates all physical attacks within a 5-meter radius for 9 seconds, and during this time the opponent cannot move. Leo Rim stood there mesmerized as he gazed at the sword player in his pajamas and admired his skill. Finally, he was able to ask if he belonged to the very rare class that only 3 players in their country belong to, and it was the Dragon Hunter class. And the newly arrived player said that it was true and added that Leo Rim has a trained eye. In Ergosphere Online, excluding the 11 initial classes among which you choose when creating a character, the classes of exaltation are determined in accordance with the player's weapons and skills, the distribution of points, and what quests they have completed. For example, if someone chose a warrior as their starting class, then in the future they can become either a butcher or a swordsman, depending on what weapons and skills they use. Since everything determines the user's style of play, there are a huge number of possibilities here. Players have already counted 84 classes. Because of this huge number of options, many people do not know how to create a dragon hunter and other classes, which is why they are called rare classes, and there are very few players around the world. The newly arrived player said that although he has a rare class, isn't Leo Rim the same? After all, few people choose such a difficult class as, for example, Avenger Lee. O-Rim was surprised by this statement. Then the Dragon Hunter said that they would talk later, but now he had come to help the boy, so it was time to do that. He said that it was time to finally deal with all the parasites that had gathered here. The butcher shouted to his minions to be careful because the Dragon Hunter was going to stun them. The hunter, meanwhile, activated his dragon's silence skill and directed it at the evil one. Then he realized that this would be enough for now, so he ordered Lee O-Rim to quickly choose his reward, but O-Rim did not understand at first. Then, the Dragon Hunter repeated in more detail for the Avenger to choose a reward and close the quest, because it would be difficult for both of them to deal with those 3 attackers. But Lee O-Rim immediately thought of Kim Shawal and his 2 other new friends who were still here. The Dragon Hunter said he didn't have to worry about them. He added that his friend Monk helps them at this time with his blessing skill. So let Lee O-Rim not worry and choose his reward because the quest will end as soon as he does. And then suddenly, right above the hunter, the Reaper brought her weapon down using one of her skills. This meant that she had managed to do something before he turned his dragon silence on them. The hunter had already consciously said goodbye to his life because he had no time to defend himself. But then his friend Monk came to his rescue and immediately activated his skill Demon Destroying Palm. And suddenly, the terrible skull that was going to destroy the Dragon Hunter split in 2. It was an incredible sight. Suddenly, Lee O-Rim heard a voice very close to him calling out to him. He turned around and saw Kim Shawal running excitedly toward him. The girl shouted to him that they were all fine, so he should calm down and quickly complete this competitive quest. So Lee O-Rim saw with his own eyes that his partner was fine, so he hurried to complete this task. While the boy was choosing his reward, he asked the Dragon Hunter who he and the monk were and why he was helping them. Then the hunter seemed to remember something and said that he had completely forgotten to introduce himself and tell them what they were doing in this quest. He said that they are Raison, that is, their guild is called Raison, which means intelligence, discretion. And then he concluded by saying that they would have the opportunity to meet again. In the end, his friend Monk helped them get a perfect grade. So that day, full of events, ended and the next morning came. This morning, Yon Sinha was relaxing in one of the city's swimming pools, having just gotten out of the water. While the woman was slowly drying herself with a towel, her smartwatch rang. She received a call from Hyun-Shin Sinha, and she greeted him and asked him how everything went last night. Hyun-Shin replied that everything was fine, although something unexpected had happened, but they had followed up properly. Hyun-Shin lay down on her lounge chair and asked Hyun-Shin if he thought those players would be useful to them or not. Yi-Chin replied in the affirmative that he and Wo-Young had already discussed everything and agreed that both the Avenger and the Maze Master could defend themselves. And of course, they noted some other very positive things, such as an interesting fact about the Avenger. The fact that he was not afraid of danger at all seemed to indicate that he was experiencing difficulties not only in the game, but also in real life. Young Sinha liked what she heard and tried to clarify that the Avenger reminded them of a wild animal. And Hyunshin agreed with her, saying that Avenger's intuition is very well developed, so he thinks that the guy can be useful for strategy development and item management. That's why he thinks it's not worth slowing down with hiring the Avenger and the Maze Master, and it would be better to do it before they get stronger and start bothering them. Yeon Shinha laughed heartily and said that it was unusual to see Hyunshin so active in recruiting newcomers, so they would set up a time to meet with those players. The conversation was over, and Wo Young then told Hyun-seung that he liked those who play at maximum speed, but Hyun-seung was outraged and told his friend to shut up. And then Hyunshin remembered that he had something else to say and called Yeon-shin again. The woman picked up the phone and heard very disappointing words about the manifestation of chaos. These words alarmed Shin, and she asked if Hyun-seung was sure of what he was talking about. And the son answered that he was completely confident and that he had every reason to think that everyone would need to start doing something. Namely, we need to start preparing for the guild clash. Yeon Sina was very upset after this message. It was this confrontation that caused her great sadness because it implied a lot of new battles. Then the woman told Hyun-seung that she and Kang Ik-jae would be getting ready, and he should tell everyone else about it. Yeon Sina hated those damn chaos bastards because they didn't understand what was happening at all, just like brainless animals. But there is nothing you can do about it, and it is necessary to fight against it, and the time has come for this again. If those from the chaos decided to show their fangs, we will have to hunt them down a bit. So the guild began to act, looking for scoundrels and holding conversations with them in closed, secluded rooms. So there was already a prisoner in one of these rooms, and Kang Ik-ju was trying to get at least some information from him. The prisoner was sitting on a chair with his hands tied backwards and wearing a blindfold. Yong Sina came and asked if the prisoner had finally spoken. Kang Ik-ju said no, and even after he woke him up from a deep sleep and kept him awake for 100 hours, the prisoner still remained silent and looked like he was ready to die. Yeon Sina listened to this information and said that if it was going to happen, there was nothing to be done about it, so it would be. The woman then approached the prisoner and with a sharp kick to his chest knocked the man and the chair to the floor. Then she pulled out her sword, touched the blade to the prisoner's neck and said that she was going to announce the rules. So let him listen carefully. Now she will pierce him with her sword over and over again until he is on the verge of losing his life, and then she will cure him, and each time after treatment he will have a chance to talk. Sinya then added with a smile that she had 5 Hilux with her, which meant he would have 5 attempts to speak. If the prisoner answers the questions asked to him, he is the winner, and if not, he will be at the end of the game. Then Yong Sinha lightly scratched the captured car and said that they only had 2 questions, the first being where the Chaos base was located, and the second question concerns personal information about the head of Chaos, the prisoner's boss. The prisoner stammered in hysterics and began to shout that he knew nothing, absolutely nothing, that he was a simple 6th wheel and had never even seen that boss in his life. Then Yong Sinha replied and clarified that it wouldn't help him because there are no exceptions to the rules in their game. The woman calmly began to pull on her gloves and said that their game would begin now because she had missed it for a long time and hadn't had any interesting quests. Sinha wondered aloud if it was possible to take the prisoner's life with the skills she rarely uses, because deadly poison is also fun. Kim Chevol and Lee O-rim almost always spent time together at school. O-rim is interested in the people who belong to the Raison Guild, and he thinks they are good. Chevol said that Raison is one of the 3 best guilds in the game, and that Raison has 800 members and has been around for a long time. Then the girl told her classmate that even though Raison was only engaged in raids and battles between guilds, it did not mean that they had not changed their goals. And given that the Horizon event will start soon, they can do other things. Lee O-rim agreed that people really go crazy when money is at stake, and Kim Shiwol said she agreed and suggested that they watch the people of the Raison Guild from a distance. So, thinking about the guild, O-rim and Shiwol left the school and then suddenly Baek In-hyun called them. As always, the boy looked at O-rom with a mysterious and studying look. In-hyun asked Lee O-rim to come over to him for a moment because they wanted to talk to him about something. But then Kim Chevol intervened in the conversation and indignantly said that he no longer liked it and what he could say to Rome after all that had happened. However, Baek In-hyun calmly replied that Chevol should not interfere with their conversation. He just wanted to talk. The girl was very angry and called In-hyun a bastard. But suddenly, she saw Lee O-rim heading towards that thug, and she was shocked to see him actually agree to talk to him. Father Rim replied that at the very least, he should be listened to because if he wanted to tell something, it would be strange if he just ran away. Then he said that even if something bad happened, he would definitely be able to handle it, so she shouldn't worry. He also said that he would definitely call her when he was done talking. Baek In-hyun led Lee O-rim to a deserted area under a bridge, and finally O-rim stopped and asked what he wanted to talk to him about. Then In-hyun asked if Lee Oh-rim knew that Seung-hwan was seriously injured and hospitalized after a fight with him. Oh-rim was really surprised because he hadn't heard that Hwang was in the hospital after that meeting, and this was the first time he had heard about it. Baek In-hyun explained that he had broken something, so he was in the hospital for a long time, and he is feeling a little better, but there are some nuances. The fact is that because of Lee Oh-rim's actions, Seung-hwan's parents are going to sue him. For Oh-rom, this news was like a bolt from the blue. He said it was just a fight, and he did not pretend that it was in any way important. Baek In-hyun said that Hwang was going to go into professional sports and did not report to the police because he thought it would hinder his future career, but apparently he changed his mind. It's been a few weeks now, so In-hyun doesn't know what the police are going to do about it, but if they start investigating the case, it will end very badly for Oh-rim. At best, he will be expelled from school, and at worst, he will be arrested. Lee Oh-rim was shocked to the point of impossibility, and meanwhile, Baek In-hyun said that there was a way out of that situation. He said that Seung-hwan's parents came to his father's law firm for advice. Lee Oh-rim immediately asked if any of the lawyers working for Baek In-hyun's father's firm were involved in Hwang's case. In-hyun confirmed Rom's guesses, saying that this was a great chance for him to get away with it, because he can persuade that lawyer to tell Seung-hwan's parents not to sue him and to insist on a peaceful solution to the problem. Lee Oh-rim was immediately alarmed and asked what kind of peaceful solution it could be and what he would need to do to achieve it. Baek In-hyun said that it was simple. He would just put in a good word with his father. Lee Oh-rim, on the other hand, will immediately go to Shin-hwan and apologize to him on his knees. This condition outraged Oh-rim very much because Hwang had been mocking him for years, humiliating him and beating him painfully. Plots from various such moments when he suffered from Shin-hwan's fists immediately began to appear in his head. But Baek In-hyun insisted on his point, saying that it was very simple. He just needed to apologize, and when Lee Oh-rim did so, he would persuade Hwang and help solve everything peacefully. Then he asked Oh-rim if he didn't think he had done the right thing then, because after all, Seung-hwan was injured and hospitalized after the incident. Baek In-hyun began to put psychological pressure on Lee Oh-rim, saying that it was his fault that Hwang was crippled and injured. Oh-rom got excited and even started to shake a little because he remembered how scared he used to be. In-hyun noticed the boy's excitement and liked it, thinking that this was the kind of expression Lee Oh-rim should have. He believed that Oh-rim's face was marked by a sense of defeat. In-hyun had always enjoyed such power over the boy. And this feeling is due to the injustice of this world, which is why the boy behaves so weakly. And that's exactly how Lee Oh-rim was always. When he was around Baek In-hyun, he was completely under his control. It doesn't matter how strong he is and how well he fights, because he can't do anything about his psychological state and his feelings. If he has no power and no money, all he can do is apologize for things that are not really his fault. Baek In-hyun considered Lee Oh-rim to be a lifelong loser, and he enjoyed humiliating the boy. But In-hyun didn't expect that Oh-rim had really changed internally, and he abruptly said that he would let Seung-hwan sue him if he wanted to, because he is not going to apologize to him, nor does he have the slightest desire to. In addition, Kim Seung-hwan had not only abused him for a long time, but even more. During their last fight, Hwang raised his hand to Kim Shi-wol, which is unacceptable, and the girl just wanted to help Oh-rim. So Lee Oh-rim can endure a lot, but he will not forgive his suffering. He can endure it, but not injustice to others. And he will never tolerate the fact that someone else may suffer because of him. So let Baek In-hyun tell Hwang that if he wants to sue him, he can, and he's not going to change his mind. Kim Shi-wol heard the whole conversation and followed the boys and hid around the corner. And Baek In-hyun was still pressuring Lee Oh-rim, asking him if he was not worried about what would be revealed during the investigation of the case. But Oh-rom stood his ground, saying that under such circumstances he was not going to bend to anyone. In the end, when they start investigating the reasons for what happened, not only he will talk, but Kim Seung-hwan will have to tell them what he did to his victim. And it is Baek In-hyun who should understand best who will get more in such a situation. After those words, Lee Oh-rim turned around and walked away, saying that he had said everything, and that no matter what happened, he would not back down from his decision. Then the bastard Baek In-hyun pulled out his trump card and asked what would happen to Lee's sister Oh-rim. Lee In-hyun said with relish that if the police intervene, his sister will find out that he was bullied, so it will be interesting to see if it will break her. For Lee Oh-rim, this remark was a blow. And Baek In-hyun continued that although his sister was unexpectedly orphaned, she still tried so hard to give him and his younger brother a decent life. And yet, her brother turned out to be an outcast from society, and then she will come face to face with the brutal truth. And even if it is really strong, it can simply destroy it. These words made Lee Oh-rim even more angry, and he began to shout at Baek In-hyun, that he knew about him from the beginning and knew about his family. In-hyun replied, "Isn't it obvious they go to the same school after all?" Lee Oh-rim's next move was to suddenly grab Baek In-hyun by the collar and face him head-on. Then I pushed him against the wall and started shouting in his face why he was silent all the time. After all, he knew what happened to him and his sister, so why did he just watch from the sidelines while Oh-rom was being abused? He could have stopped those thugs. He could have stopped these groundless, humiliating mockery. Besides, his position allowed him to do so, and the guys would have no problem listening to him. But Baek In-hyun only smiled at Lee Oh-rim's accusations. He asked why he had to do it, i.e. why he had to protect someone. Lee Oh-rim didn't even know how to answer. He just said that things used to be different. They used to be friends in their childhood, spending time together and playing together. And then, when the bastard started mocking Oh-rim, Baek In-hyun could have pitied him, could have helped him. And he could have done it at least for his sister's sake if he didn't care about him. However, Baek In-hyun coldly replied that he had never considered Lee Oh-rim to be his friend at all. And he added, "Let Oh-rim think for himself how someone like him can be a friend of such a In-hyun." He said that he had everything, and Lee Oh-rim had absolutely nothing and even no parents. They are completely different. So why did Lee Oh-rim expect In-hyun to be his friend and protect him? They only played together a few times because In-hyun himself was bored at the time. And then Baek In-hyun smiled and said that he was sure that Kim Shi-wol was thinking the same thing right now. After all, that girl also has everything. She was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. And now, she just plays with him and does it only because she finds him amusing. That's why he really didn't care whether Liu Oh-rom was hurt or not, and he was never going to defend him. Oh-rom and his sister are just miserable orphans who have nothing in this life, no matter how hard they try. Baek In-hyun continued to mock with words, saying that the lives of Oh-rim and his sister were very worthless. They are so insignificant that from his height he doesn't even notice them, and Lee Oh-rim has been remembering his sister all this time. The bastard In-hyun's words made him very angry, and he grabbed his collar even harder. And Lee Oh-rim's next step was to punch Baek In-hyun in the face with all his might. He said that all this time he thought that his so-called friend had just gotten involved with a bad company. But as it turned out, it wasn't so. Baek In-hyun was sitting on the ground wiping his face after the blow. Now, Lee Oh-rim realized that his former friend had found himself a friend who was actually a scumbag like him. Baek In-hyun also asked if it was possible that Oh-rim was waiting for him to start apologizing to him and was about to hit the guy. However, Lee Oh-rim replied that he did not need an apology from such a scoundrel. And then, he did not let In-hyun attack him with his fist and hit him again. Baek In-hyun fell to the floor, and Lee Oh-rim said that he did not expect his apology at all. Then the guy said that he would deal with him later, but he was not in the mood for that right now. One day, the day will come when Lee Oh-rim will look down on Baek In-hyun, and he will be taller than he has ever been. And the boy went home, leaving the bastard In-hyun lying on the floor under the bridge, until someone came up behind him and ordered him to raise his hands. It was Kim Shi-wol, who put her fingers to the back of Oh-roman's head and said that if he moved, she would shoot him. Then the girl laughed that she had made a perfect shot as usual, but Lee Oh-rim accepted the game and said, why did she shoot it anyway? Because he was not moving. Shi-wol replied that it was just because the back of his head was asking for a bullet. The guy asked what it meant. Then Kim Shi-wol asked Lee Oh-rim a direct question about his childhood friendship with Baek In-hyun. She apologized and said that she had followed them because she was worried about him, and as a result, heard everything they were talking about. Kim Shi-wol then said that this was probably a painful topic for him, and apologized again for overhearing the conversation, but Lee Oh-rim assured her that she had nothing to apologize for. It's not such an important story, but now she's very ashamed of herself for trusting such a scumbag as Baek In-hyun. Then Kim Shi-wol asked how close they were as children with him. Lee Oh-rim smiled and said that he and Baek In-hyun actually went to the same elementary school and then to the same high school as children. In elementary school, they played together after school almost every day, and he recalls that they were almost like best friends. But when they went to high school, Baek In-hyun began to communicate with the popular boys there, and at that time a gap seemed to appear between them. Lee Oh-rim stopped, and Kim Shi-wol asked if that was when Baek In-hyun started mocking Oh-rim. The guy said that at first In-hyun invited him to join his new company of popular guys, but then everything changed. Kim Shi-wol told him not to blame himself for what happened, that it was solely Baek In-hyun's fault, and that there was no point in the victim suffering over it. Because the one who betrayed should feel guilty, not the one who trusted the traitor. Lee Oh-rim seemed to agree, but then he remembered how Baek In-hyun had mentioned Kim Shi-wol and said that she thought exactly like him. But Shi-wol had already finished that delicate topic, and she just wanted to apologize for overhearing her friend's conversation with Baek In-hyun. Then she said that if Lee Oh-rim had no plans for the evening, he could come to her house and they would eat ramen together. He panicked and asked why on earth he should go to her house to eat ramen, and he was completely confused about what they were talking about. Kim Shivol got a little angry and said that she just wanted to cook ramen for him. Or did he have to have a reason for it? In addition, he may soon be sued, and she is going to help him with this. However, Lee Oh-rim said that these were his problems. They should not affect anyone else, he could handle them himself, and he could not afford to ask Kim Shiwol to do so. Then the girl answered directly, if he is arrested, she will be left without a party, which means that this case is also important to her. And that's why they have to figure it out together, because it's their joint party, doesn't he understand? Lee Oh-rim still didn't want to agree to a night out together, so he asked if they could discuss it over the phone, and Kim Shiwol said they couldn't because ramen was part of their quest. At that time, in one building, a necromancer was leading a reaper with her hands and eyes blindfolded, and a butcher met them and praised the reaper for coming to them. The reaper said to finally remove the bandage and the spell from her hands because she wanted to see the boss of chaos with her own eyes. Then the butcher apologized and said that he could only remove the blindfold because she had too many different skills that were difficult to handle. The reaper called him a fucking coward because that's not what she was promised, and he told her that she would only be tied up until they got to the base. And then the boss himself called out from the balcony and ordered the butcher to untie the reaper. The butcher was a little worried because he realized how much they risked if they released the person they brought. But the president said that the reaper had already come a long way and that if she was tied up, they would not be able to have tea. But the reaper said that she was not going to drink any tea, so the case moved on and the boss of chaos appeared. She knew that the leader of chaos belonged to the emperor class, named Reaper Hong Kiho. Reaper always dreamed of meeting him and seeing what he looked like. The president said that this was a great coincidence because he had been wanting to meet her for a long time. Then he invited her to the table where there was a kettle of tea and 2 cups and asked if she really wouldn't like a drink. After all, he made a great tea when he heard that she was coming to visit him today and said that the smell of tea fades a little bit every time you lift the lid, so he doesn't drink it that often. The Reaper snorted defiantly and said she didn't need any letters, just let the president tell her why he had called her to see him. And the Chaos Boss replied that maybe he just wanted to talk to his ally over a cup of tea. And then the Reaper started to get nervous and told the president to stop talking nonsense and just tell her what he needed from her before she got angry and blew up his base. Although it might be better if she broke their agreement and took his life. The boss just laughed at this and asked if she was really ready to recklessly throw herself at anyone. After all, that's what they told him about her, that she was a real cliché thief. The boss said that he really likes people like Hong Kiho because thieves like her create a narrative in a boring world and he finds it very amusing. Reaper Hong Kiho listened to this speech in silence and then coldly asked if he had finally spoken. The boss replied that if she didn't like their conversation, he suggested talking about business and getting to know each other better. And he said that he knew about her, namely her name is Hong Kiho. She is a student of Osun High School, age 2, grade 3, and she is a person who takes the lives of others. This speech made Hong Kiho very angry, and she began to shout that she would take her boss's life. The boss laughed again and said that he really liked her and that she even had a tragic past as a classic thief. The Reaper could not stand it and rushed to attack the Chaos Boss, but he easily restrained her and said that what he had just said was not enough. The boss used the kneeling skill, which made Hong Kiho completely lose her strength. She fell to the floor, and the boss said that a really good thief should have an ambitious plan different from the ideologies of others. Moreover, it must be so noble that it can instantly destroy the plans of others. And then he sat down across from Hong Kiho and asked if she understood what he was talking about. No matter how good a playmaker she was or how she used her skills, she was still just part of the game system. The boss kept saying that she should be like a thief waiting for her turn. Did she realize how ridiculous and stupid this was? And then he decided to move on to their case, and he said directly that he had one request for her. If Hong Kiho accepts his offer, he will teach her how to open the back door as a reward. This will allow her to get rid of the shackles of the system, and asked if she was intrigued by this plan. And he warned her that she could refuse after hearing the essence of his proposal, but he wanted to hear her answer anyway. Then the boss looked at the cups of tea and said that the smell of tea was fading very quickly. Meanwhile, Kim Shiwol and Lee Oh-rim came to the girl's house, and she said she would go change and let him feel at home, although Oh-rim was quite uncomfortable with the place. Shiwol went to change, and the guy was amazed by the high ceilings of the apartment, which looked like those in TV shows. Then he saw a family portrait photo on the wall, with Kim Shiwol and her mom and dad. It was a little old photo when Shiwol was still in middle school, and her hair was shorter. In the photo, she was the only one of the children. So Lee Oh-rim thought she was the only child in the family, and he thought she had brothers or sisters. The boy's thoughts were interrupted by Kim Shiwol's voice, and he looked back at the corner. The girl had already changed her clothes, tied up her hair, and asked him how many packs of ramen he wanted. The guy thought that he and Kim Chevol always talked only about the game, and he had never asked her anything about herself. Now they both went to the kitchen. Lee O-Rim sat down at the table and thought about why a girl living in such a huge house would risk her life playing a game. And then he remembered how she had once joked that she would like to have a harem of idols, to make it a secret garden just for her, and O-Rim thought she really wanted something like that. Kim Chevol was silently cooking ramen, and the guy wondered what she was thinking about. So the girl cooked dinner, and they both ate deliciously. Lee O-Rim said he felt great because ramen is always good whenever you eat it, and Chevol asked if it was really delicious. She smiled and said that she always feels much better when she eats ramen after a hard day, which is why she invited him to dinner. This surprised Liu O-Rima, and he noticed that she was too kind today. Then Kim Chewol gathered the dishes and went to wash them, so O-Rim immediately got up and said that he would help her with this, but she refused and said that she could do it herself. While she was washing the dishes, Lee O-Rim asked when her parents would be home. Kim Chevol replied that she did not know because they always come back late. Then she said with sadness in her voice that sometimes her parents come sooner, but it is extremely rare and usually she is alone in the evening. Lee O-Rim said that in this case they probably have a housekeeper who lives with them and helps with cooking. Kim Chevol called her classmate a jerk and said that they don't have a housekeeper. Does he think they live like the rich in the movies and have a lot of servants? The girl explained that, of course, there are special people who help them with the housework, but they don't come every day, and Leo Rim thought that means they do have a housekeeper. The guy said he was just surprised because he had imagined that in the evening they would get together with the whole family and all the servants would do everything for them. And he would never have thought that she would do the dishes herself. Kim Shiwol suddenly told him not to talk like that, and Lee was a little surprised by her request. And the girl lowered her head and said that she was not at all like he thought she was. Although she has been living more comfortably than others since she was born, she is not that kind of person and will not command others. She won't do it just because she has a lot of money. She has a different opinion about it. And then Kim Chevol added that she had never thought of Lee O-Rim as some kind of cool animal. Then Lee O-Rim finally realized why the girl was being so nice to him today. She was just very upset by what Baek In-hyun said, who claimed that she thought the same way as him, that she's just playing with Lee O-Rim because she thinks he's cool. And the guy told Kim Chevol that he hadn't even thought about her doing that to him, because from the very beginning, he noticed that she was completely different. After all, she helped him when he was bullied. She helped him when he was almost killed by a play killer. She agreed to his plan during a competitive quest. A person who thinks he is better than others or is just playing with people would never do that. Lee O-Rim said that even if others think she's just a rich girl, he definitely doesn't think so. After all, he first met her when she was a labyrinth master. Kim Chevol blushed and told him to stop because he was embarrassing her. And what kind of nonsense was that about washing dishes? It means that he does have some prejudices. Lee O-Rim was a little embarrassed and said that he hadn't meant to say what he said. In fact, he wanted to say that he couldn't imagine her in an apron and was a little surprised when he saw her. But I immediately thought to myself that that apron suited her very well. Kim Chevol was very angry at this compliment and attacked him, calling him a pervert, and the guy resisted calling him a pervert right away. Somewhere else, Baek In-hyun returned home with a band-aid attached to his nose. The boy got out of the elevator and met his father at the door to the apartment and called him. The father turned around and handed his son a package, saying that it was a gift from his grandmother, who had made it herself. Baek In-hyun angrily asked why this gift should be handed over to him personally, as it is usually done by the housekeeper. My father explained that he was passing by and decided to look in and was curious how he was alone here. Then the father looked at his son's face and asked what happened to him. Did someone hit him? However, Baek In-hyun simply brushed it off and said that nothing of the sort had happened. The father sadly replied that he knew that his son would not say anything. Then he added that his son was completely like his mother, and he probably often reproached him with this expression. In-hyun decided to leave, and his father told him that he didn't expect anything good from him anyway. But let him not force him to apologize for his misdeeds. Baek In-hyun lowered his head even more, said that he understood everything, and left deep in thought. Finally, the father also said that it was only the first semester, so if his son wanted to change schools, he should say so right away, and he would look for another good school. Or In-hyun has the opportunity to go abroad and asked what he was doing in a regular school. After all, he is the son of the elite, so let him behave accordingly. Then the father asked if his son understood him. Baek In-hyun clenched his teeth tightly, and as usual told his father that he understood. A YouTuber who runs the Yellow Square YouTube channel was filming another video and asked if those who watch it are still afloat, because he would think that everyone else who doesn't watch it has already fallen away. He has arrived at a mysterious place where a terrible explosion of unknown origin has recently occurred. And do the viewers think it's very boring because it happens all the time? Maybe they've already decided to unsubscribe because the content is monotonous. But that's not how mysteries are investigated, but by gradually penetrating their essence, and he doesn't do nonsense. And he doesn't do it because he has nothing to make a video about. But in general, he was also bored with the monotony of a place like this, where there is nothing to catch. And that is why he has prepared something special for today. He began to think about why this happens at all. And I came to a stunning conclusion. It's all about cheese. But the audience will immediately ask what cheese has to do with it. It's just ordinary food. And the YouTuber said that the viewers should read books. So of course, cheese is just food. But there is one theory in the world that is actually not as tasty as you might imagine when you think about cheese. This theory is called the universe as sliced cheese. And it says that people live as if on a thin slice of cheese, which is influenced by other universes piled on top of each other, like slices of cheese. Now the audience will ask what this theory has to do with anything, and how it differs from the idea of parallel universes. The YouTuber said that the viewers are jerks. Let them think for themselves that the world is not just a theory. Another world that people did not even realize existed affects them. And he talks about the new world they are yet to see in the future, about Zone 2. Meanwhile, Baek In-hyun played Ergosphere and managed to defeat and neutralize a huge monster. Suddenly, a player started to approach him and In-hyun turned his weapon from the monster to him. The player was immediately very frightened and began to scream not to be shot at because he was not a monster but an ordinary person. Baek In-hyun silently withdrew his crossbow and the player exhaled a sigh of relief, saying that he was very scared. In-hyun went on his way and the player looked at the monster he had killed and said that the executioner was a skilled player because he defeated an ogre that usually takes 5 to defeat and in a cursed forest. In-hyun kept saying nothing and the player kept talking, saying that the executioner was very cool and that he had heard that there was a very good reward for this quest. And now In-hyun finally told the player to fuck off. The player asked him again, clearly not liking In-hyun's answer. The torturer barely turned back and said that he had no desire to talk to him, so let him go away, or did he need to repeat it twice to get it? The player laughed nervously and said that the executioner must have had a bad day today. Then he said that in that case, he should apologize to him for bothering him. However, he still did not back down and insidiously asked if this was the answer he was expected to give. And the next moment, he called In-hyun an arrogant bastard and said that he was going to rob him and activated his swindler skill. After your life is over, your whole body is mine is a stealing skill. And then Baek In-hyun turned around and did not point his crossbow at the fraudster. The guy activated the executioner's skill, quick execution stun. The fraudster immediately fell on his back and hurt himself, then got up and said that the executioner had scared him a lot. And Baek In-hyun immediately activated another of his skills, the executioner's ultimatum Robespierre's guillotine. And then the fraudster realized that it was not a joke and began to apologize fervently and say that he had made a mistake. He even started shouting that if the executioner took his life here, he would become a playmaker and be fined. However, Baek In-hyun asked coldly, and he didn't care about it at all. And then he pointed his crossbow at the fraudster again, saying that he would finally take his life immediately. After Baek In-hyun destroyed the cheater, the system contacted him and informed him that he had just attacked another user, so he was banned from the city's stores for the next 56 hours. If he continues to accumulate penalty points during the penalty, he will be forcibly transferred to the Island of Chaos, then asked to take this remark into account and continue to play according to the rules. Baek In-hyun was angry that all this happened to him because of those damn idiots. And he remembered Lee Oh-rom, who had beaten up his boyfriend the day before, and he was talking about himself, where only those idiots come from. Suddenly, In-hyun heard someone behind him again expressing admiration for how cool he was. But the executioner was already so wound up that he turned around with his weapon in his hands and fired a shot without hesitation. A player standing opposite him said that the executioner pulled the trigger even without considering the consequences and that it was admirable. Then he said that if Baek In-hyun had some time, he could offer him something. In-hyun asked him briefly what he wanted from him, or maybe he just wanted to get rid of his life like the fraudster. The player laughed and said of course he didn't want to, and he wasn't going to get into a fight with him. On the contrary, he wants to get to know him a little better and showed him a heart with his fingers. And then Baek In-hyun pointed his crossbow at him again, called the player a repulsive bastard, and said he almost threw up. But suddenly, that player was already behind In-hyun's back and said very sweetly that the executioner was a real daredevil who shot him right in the face. Baek In-hyun turned around sharply, not expecting the other player to move so quickly. Then the player rose a little higher in the air and said that he was a recruiter for a guild. He also told us that he had been watching Baek In-hyun for a long time, and he believed that the guy's abilities would be very well used in their guild, so he offered him an interview with their head and to join the guild. However, Baek In-hyun told the player to fuck off because he was not interested in any guilds. Then the player smiled slightly and said that it was a pity because he was going to tell him something interesting. For example, about an event with a 20 billion won reward, and the player was smiling slyly. Or an amazing ability to transfer his game character to reality, it was noticeable that Baek In-hyun was insanely interested in such proposals. But it was so unrealistic that he said that the player was talking nonsense. And again, some horrible memories suddenly surfaced in In-hyun's mind. In the meantime, the player said that he would have to pay for additional information and invited Baek In-hyun to come to the Island of Chaos if he was interested. He also said that if he killed all the play killers on the island and got to the top of the tower, he would tell him much more. In-hyun will have to try a little harder, of course, if he wants to hear something interesting. And then the black door appeared. The player said to the executioner to see you and use the teleportation skill. Baek In-hyun was overwhelmed and thought about the unexpected change in his appearance. And he immediately thought of Lee Oh-rim, thinking that the guy was somehow involved. The next morning, Kim Shawol and Lee Oh-rim were walking to school together. The girl said that she had asked her cousin last night, and she said that if Oh-rim could prove that a whole group of people had bullied him, he would not be arrested. In other words, everything can be resolved if she testifies in his favor, so he doesn't have to worry about being sued. Lee Oh-rim exhaled a sigh of relief. He was worried more about his sister than himself. He said that he couldn't sleep all night thinking about the possibility of going to jail. Kim Shawol asked what happened to the bravado that made him tell In-hyun to sue. As they approached the school, his classmates saw a sports car parked near it, and Lee Oh-rim suggested that maybe someone had won the lottery or something like that. Suddenly, Shawol gasped and asked her classmate if this was his gift to her, but Lee Oh-rim said that it was not because he would have to defeat 100 monsters to get such a gift. And then someone called Oh-rim and Kim Shawol by name and waved to them. Kang Ik-ju and Yong Sin-ha were standing near the sports car, and the woman greeted the students. Then she said that they came to school early because she thought they would be there only around the second lesson. Kim Shawol asked a classmate if he knew who they were, but Oh-rim didn't know them either. However, the boy guessed who this woman might be, and Shawol also had some suspicions. The students both thought that these men and women were representatives of the Raison Guild. Young Sinya said with a smile that they seemed to have guessed who she was, in which case why not skip out and go for a ride with her. The woman said that the weather was nice today and they had a lot to talk about. Then she took off her sunglasses and asked if they would agree to go to their base. So Kim Shawol and Lee Oh-rim agreed and got into the car, which immediately started moving. Kim Shawol was a little scared and asked her partner if it was okay that they went with those people. The boy replied that those people knew their names and knew which school they went to, so they could attack them anytime. Then Kim Shawol clarified that since they did not attack them, their goal was probably just to talk. Lee Oh-rim replied that he thought so and believed that in any case they should listen to them. And if they are lucky, they will also learn details about the latest Horizon event. The sports car was going very fast, and all four of them, Yeon Sin-ha, Kang Ik-ju, Kim Shawol, and Lee Oh-rim, arrived at the base of the Raison Guild. Young Sin-ha said she wanted to introduce the students to other members of the guild and asked where they would like to talk in private or in a cafe. Kim Shawol replied that it was better to be alone because it would be too noisy and uncomfortable to talk in a cafe. Sin-ha said that she thought so because the daughter of the head of a pharmaceutical company can boast of life experience. The woman then said that she would soon gather everyone in a private room, and Shawol noted that they knew their personal information well. Lee Oh-rim asked the girl if she had been to that room before, and Shawol said that she and her parents used to come here every summer when she was little, and that her father liked to spend his vacations here. And the girl sadly said that those were good times. Lee Oh-rim heard a hint of nostalgia in his partner's voice and felt bad for her. He wondered if Kim Shawol was talking about the end of those good times. Soon after, Lee Oh-rim and Kim Shawol, accompanied by Yeon Shin and Kang Ik-ju, took the elevator to the 8th floor and approached the same room. Yeon Sin-ha opened the door and invited everyone inside, saying that everyone was waiting for them. In the room, 6 people were sitting in different places, all of them members of the Raison Guild. Lee Oh-rim said that there were fewer people than he expected. Kim Shawol agreed and said that the guild was large, so she thought there would be 30 or 40 people. Young Sin-ha explained that they are indeed a large guild, but not all of them were transferred. Oh-rim did not understand what the word means. Then Sin-ha said that when a person in real life becomes their game character, they call it transference. Kim Shawol intervenes in the conversation and asked if this was true. Maybe they knew the reason why this was happening. Wo-young said that none of them understood the principle behind the transfer, and there were no scientists among them. They tried to understand how it all happened, even sharing information about the circumstances under which the transfer took place. Yeon Sin-ha said that as far as she understood, the transfer condition is to have an account in the top 100. Although not all of their members from this list were transferred, they still believe that this is the case because it is the only thing that unites them all. Then Lee Oh-rim asked if this meant that everyone in the room was on the top 100 list. Yeon-sina replied that she shouldn't be so surprised because she and Kim Shivol were also on the list. Lee Oh-rim is number 89 and Kim Shivol is number 47, and although they may not care in the ergosphere, this list exists most likely to stroke the ego of many. Especially Lee Oh-rim. He did not take part in the Team Quest Dungeon of Plenty, which would have helped to quickly increase his rank. The guy is a special case because he rose to the top 100 solely thanks to single quests and events. In addition, he hardly ever participated in PvP, which are essentially battles for rank. Young Sinha asked Lee Oh-rim if he had any special reason for this, and the guy said that he just didn't care and didn't like fighting with people even in games. Now, one of the guild members asked what this guy would be able to do in a real battle, and they wouldn't be able to win just because they were good players. Yun Sung said that it also confused him at first, because monsters are not the only ones they fight. But Lee Oh-rim fought a spearman from Chaos who had many items and managed to defeat him himself. This doubtful woman was very surprised to see how the boy managed to win without the help of objects. Meanwhile, Hyun-shin concluded that neither rank nor history should be of much concern to them, and judging by what he saw, Lee Oh-rim's intuition and control of the situation alone were enough to get him to the top of the list. And if they do not accept him into their guild, it will be a great loss for them. Suddenly, Kim Shivol interrupted the conversation and said that enough was enough. The girl noticed that the conversation had long since turned into a very strange direction, and why they had actually invited her and Oh-rim here. Shivol asked directly whether she was inviting them to join her guild. After that, Yeon-sina laughed and said that she thought it was obvious, but apparently she was wrong, and the woman told the girl that she was right because that was why they were here. Judging from what they saw, Kim Shiwol and Lee Oh-rim's skills and classes would be a great addition to their guild, which is why she decided to meet them and call them in. And given that they do not know what awaits them during the new event, they simply need to expand their ranks. Lee Oh-rim asked if she meant Horizon by the upcoming event. Yeon Sinha replied that it was, and that she sees that school children already know about it. Then the woman said that it would be beneficial for both of them to join the guild because they share not only information about quest rewards, but also discuss the transfer and the game itself. Then Kim Shivol angrily asked if this meant that they had not told them everything. Yeon-sina threw up her hands and said that she knew everything or almost everything, and that the only way to find out for sure was to join their guild. In addition, there are other advantages to this. Kim Shivol and Lee Oh-rim will have the privileges of adults that school children can only dream of. The guild will pay them for completing monthly quests and provide them with healing. They will also give them VIP access to this hotel, which will become their base. Yeon-sina has already said a lot of interesting things and then added some more, namely that the guild will protect them from chaos. Lee Oh-rim asked if by chaos she meant an island where you are forcibly sent for the physical destruction of a player. Yeon-sina confirmed Oh-rim's guesses but said that chaos is not only an island but also a nickname for play killers who are up to no good. And by the way, in real life, chaos is a guild for play killers. Lee Oh-rim remembered the necromancer and the butcher he had the misfortune to meet, so they belonged to that guild, and he thought they were just a couple of wandering players. But it turns out they work together like any other guild. Young-sina decided to take the floor again and said that this was just a prelude to what Kim Shiwol and Lee Oh-rim might say about it. She asked what the students would do, whether they would join their guild or leave and pretend that this conversation had never happened. Lee Oh-rim was thinking hard about what to do, because there was nothing wrong with guilds, and the game itself would become even easier compared to what it was when it was just him and Kim Shiwol participating. But something was bothering the guy, and then Shivol asked what would happen to the awards for Horizon. She was interested in the 20 million won, and what would happen if only one member of the guild came out on top and his wish came true. Young-sina looked down and said that they always share money equally and that they will decide what their wish is together. But Kim Shivol did not let up. She said she had one more question. If she and Lee Oh-rim refused the offer to join them, what would they do in that case? Yeon-sina said that they would not do anything, but if they meet during the event, it would be better for Kiss Shivol and Lee Oh-rim not to interfere with the guild members. And then the woman said that they were going to win no matter what, and no matter who their opponent was. Kim Shivol was also thinking hard about what to do, because if she joined them, her chances of winning Horizon would increase. But in that case, she would have to give up her wish, and on the other hand, if she did not join them, her chances of winning would be negligible. In addition, the Rezon Guild is among the top 3, and they are true honored veterans of the game. Kim Shawol really thought that she and Lee O-rim were unlikely to win together, and their lives were on the line. If she wants to survive, she will have to join them. While she was thinking like this, her partner took the floor. Lee O-rim said with a tight fist that in that case they would refuse the offer. This was an unexpected answer, and Yong Sinha asked if she could ask why he had made this decision. And the guy clearly answered that he and Kim Shawol had a wish that they really wanted to fulfill. Then what's the point of playing if they have to give up their desire to become part of the guild? They'd rather try to win the event as a party. One girl recognized that Lee O-rim has a core, and Wo Young noted that the guy is more ambitious than he seems at first glance. Yeon Shina did not give up and asked if she could find out what Kim Shawol and Lee O-rim's wish was. Perhaps it was similar to theirs. Then Lee O-rim gathered his courage and decided to reveal this secret, and he said in one breath that they wanted to create a kingdom in which each of them had his own harem of favorite idols. Yongshin was shocked by the surprise. The other guild members were also shocked by the request, and Kim Shiwol was ready to grab her partner by the throat. Nain. And only Lee O-rim took everything very seriously and summarized that this is exactly what they wanted. Then Kim Shawol couldn't stand it and attacked O-rim, saying that he was a sick jerk. And then she joked how he could say such things, or was he completely crazy, and she would beat him until his passive voice was turned on. Lee O-rim fought off his partner's fists and said that even if she wanted the wrong thing, she still had a desire. The guy asked if it was true, and Shawol stopped for a moment and said that she had one wish. And then the silent Kang Ik-ju said that no matter how skilled Kim Shiwol and Lee O-rim are, they are still children. He was angry with the situation with the school children fighting and told the guildmaster that he had warned her about it and that such children needed to be taught a lesson so that they would not interfere in the game. Yeon Sinha now agreed with him and said he was right. Then Kang Ik-ju angrily said that we didn't have to wait for Horizon because he could deal with the school children right now. And the man started yelling at Kim Shiwol and Lee O-rim that if they were playing the game for such a stupid reason, their guilds were completely useless. Kang Ik-ju was a very strong player. He belonged to the Spiritual Warrior class, rank 13, and he decided to deal with Lee O-rom, who belongs to the Avenger class, rank 89. Kang Ik-ju activated his boulder-smashing bear paw skill and was about to start a battle with the school children. But Kim Shawol shouted at him what he was doing because there was no need to get into a fight just because they disagreed with them. And Yeon Sinha apologized and said that they were doing other things, not just recruiting new members, and Shawol asked what other things. Sinha answered that they also hunt for players who can hinder their guild and help them to leave the game. Lee O-rim asked how they are different from play killers. They are exactly the same as Chaos, who attack everyone indiscriminately. Then Wo Young said that they do not physically destroy people like the representatives of Chaos do.